Meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. So just a little preview. We're going to do two continuances first, then we're going to do executive session, which means that's something done outside of the public. So that means we're going to ask all of you to leave. That'll be about half an hour. Then we'll come back into the opening session. Anything that we think may be quick, we'll do first, and then we'll get into the remainder of the meetings and hearings. Okay? So, all right, so first we have 350 Winthrop Avenue, Delta MB LLC, application for site plan review, special permit. They have asked to continue until March 19th. So can I get a motion to continue that until March 19th?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, move to March 19th. Next, we have 0 Great Pond Road, LRC Builders LLC, care of Robert Innes, application for a watershed special permit under Part 5, Watershed Protection District in Section 195-10.7 of the Town of North Andover bylaw. Applicant seeks to construct a new single-family dwelling with improvements to existing driveway and connection to existing utility services within the Residential 1 zoning district with work within the non-disturbance buffer zone of Lake Achitwick. They have requested that this be continued, so we'll open the public hearing. As of now, we're not going to take any evidence or any testimony, and we will continue it till March 19th. Is that correct?
They've asked to continue actually until April 16th.
April 16th. Are we within timelines if we do that?
Yes.
Okay. So can we get a motion to continue 0 Great Pond Road until April, what was the date?
The applicant is here if you would like to ask any.
Do you want to say anything, or are you good if we just continue it?
No, to be continued.
Okay.
Just a question.
Yes.
We continue until then,
Yes.
and then we have questions that require time to get feedback. Are we so close to the end that we're forced into making a decision before we get more information?
I believe we can get a agreement from the applicant to
Okay.
continue the time period, any time periods
We may
necessary.
need to do that.
Yep. So there are a lot going on with this project, as I'm told, and a lot of different things that need to be addressed. I think we're giving the applicant time to try to address some of those issues before coming here, so that we don't have to
Yeah.
send them back too many times to address things. So
There may be
that's the
other
idea.
issues.
That, for now, a motion to continue till
April 16th.
April 16th.
So moved.
Can we get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, April 16th. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to do Varsity Wireless versus North Andover Planning Board, which is ongoing litigation. And I would make a motion that the planning board go into executive session for confidential communication to discuss litigation strategy within the case of Varsity Wireless versus North Andover Planning Board. I, as the chair, have declared that an open meeting would be detrimental to the town's litigation strategy. An open session will reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session. Could I get a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to go in executive session.
Okay, we get a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote for executive session. John?
I, John Sands, vote to go into executive session.
I, Aaron Preston, vote to go into executive session.
I also vote to go into executive session.
I, Peter Boynton, vote to go into executive session.
I, Lori Crane, vote to go into executive session.
Okay, so unanimous, we're going to go into executive session. So I would ask that anyone not involved, please exit. Yep. No, we'll stay here. We'll stay here.
What's everyone else here for?
Fields and the mills, mostly the fields. All right, so we're going to jump around a little bit. We're going to start with annual town meeting zoning bylaw map amendment article well, they all say Article 10, to amend the zoning bylaw, Article 6, signs and sign lighting regulations, requirements and permitting process for certain signs, and to delete sections of Article 6 that are inappropriately categorized as sign regulations. Town Council, Suzanne Egan is here, so I will turn it over to her on that.
Thank you. So the article before you to amend the Article 6 of the sign bylaw and the sign lighting regulation, what that does is it brings the sign bylaw into compliance with sort of the federal First Amendment law. There's a recent Supreme Court case that found that signs that are regulated on the basis of their content are a violation of the First Amendment. And so the signs have to be the sign regulations have to be content neutral and go to regulate things like time, place, and manner of the signs, and not specific as to what they're advertising or what is the language and the communication on the sign. So I've made some amendments to the bylaw that just specifically eliminate the content type regulations, such as there's some regulations in there that say you can have a sign for political or religious purposes on your lot during these hours. Now that's blatantly content-based regulation that the court has found is in violation of the First Amendment. There are not that many changes to the sign amendment, but it's just to sort of piece out the content-based regulations. I've also included in your packet a letter from the Attorney General, because all bylaws that are adopted at town meeting have to be reviewed by the Massachusetts Attorney General, and as to whether or not they're compliant with the law. And they put out a particular decision each time they review a sign bylaw that says these are the factors in the recent Supreme Court case. It's called the Reed decision, and that they consider with regard to changes to a sign bylaw. And then they say these are the types of regulations, these are the manner of regulations that are acceptable. So I gave that to you for your information, so you can sort of have a better understanding of the Reed decision and the types of issues that the Attorney General's office will look at when they review this to approve it.
We got two copies. Are they one of the same? One was in our packet, one Jean just handed out. Are they the same?
They might, yeah, probably. Yep,
So,
probably.
Suzanne, there's a definition of obscenity, but I don't see anything actually in the bylaw about no obscene signs. So just curious on that. Maybe I missed it.
I believe in the definition, it talks about there's a prohibition against obscene signs. I can look at that. That's not something that,
I'm not
doesn't
reading.
that do that?
The definition just gives the statutory definition.
Yep.
I'm not sure I see anywhere where it actually talks about it.
All right, well, I'm going to review that to make sure that we do prohibit the obscene signs.
6.5I.
Okay, thank you.
6.5.
Oh, yes, I. No sign
Okay,
shall be
thank you.
erected to
Yep, okay, I
display
couldn't see it.
contains
Thank you.
obscene matter.
All right,
Yes.
great.
Suzanne, all it looks like is that stuff was Xed out. Nothing-
Absolutely.
Okay. Some of them, just skimming the relationship between, like, what the Supreme Court decision says and what got Xed out seems a little tenuous in some cases. I mean, I just can't figure out, in all cases, like, the logic of why something was, like, non-accessory sign, any sign that's not an accessory sign. Well, that maybe is bad prose, but it's not,
So it's well, the reason that was Xed out is because an accessory sign, the definition of an accessory sign is based on the content of an accessory sign.
Okay.
So if we have an accessory sign that's, the definition is based on the content of it, then to define another sign that's a non-accessory sign doesn't really make sense. It's not internally consistent.
Well, there's another example on the back of the third last page, shall not be higher than 3 feet above
Yeah.
ground level. How does that tie into it's Xed out?
What's the section?
B, C,
Yeah, 5, section 5, the BCD, yeah.
shall not be higher than 3 feet above ground level, shall be stationary, shall not be illuminated.
Okay, so that all relates to section 5. So the 5, it says 5A, B, C, D. And so that's, those are the parameters for candidate or ballot question signs. So because section 5 was taken out, the parameters relating to those was also taken out. So
it's
they're saying a
only
ballot
one-
question.
It's only one type of sign, you're saying.
Yeah,
like,
exactly,
okay.
right.
But for just, if you made it applicable to everything, you could make that no higher than 3 feet above ground level. I mean,
You could, if you wanted to.
If you wanted
But-
to. It would make a lot of sense, but,
Yeah, and it would be inconsistent with the other regulations
Yeah.
about temporary signs. So yes, you could. So that's all related to the ballots question, candidate and ballot question. And then just on the back, the last couple of sections of the ordinance, the bylaw, related to landscape buffering and lighting, which I think was just misorganized. It doesn't really relate to signs, so we just deleted that.
Okay. So why don't we just take a look at this and we can pick it up again at the next meeting if we have time to review. But the intent is just is not to change the real crux of the sign guidelines. It's only the First Amendment issues is in this. We may have to go back at some other point and actually look at whether these sign guidelines are appropriate.
Exactly, right. It's not to sort of rearrange your entire sign bylaw, it's just to bring it up to speed. Because I think if we wanted to do that, we'd probably want to take a closer look at it and have a lot of input into that.
Right, and that
Yeah.
may be appropriate, just for next time.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, does anyone want to comment on the sign? Nope, excellent. All right, so we'll continue that for the next meeting,
Yes, it'll be March 19th.
March 19th, awesome. And I don't think we need you for that,
Okay.
but if we do, we'll let you know, but I think
Okay,
we should be
good.
okay.
All right.
Okay, let's do some other relatively quick ones if we can. Article 10 to amend the zoning map parcel 106D 0045 1874 Turnpike Street to be included within the Business 2 zoning district.
So again, I just ask that you use the ones that I'm handing out, because I've added an explanation that I think probably wasn't in the package.
Great. All right, so as reference, this was a warrant article to amend 1874 Turnpike Street on the map to be included with the within the Business 2 zoning district. I believe this was going to be the dance studio, is that right?
Yes, professional office as well as dance studio.
Office and dance studio. And they had agreed to a covenant to condition out certain other uses in B2, and we talked about that last time.
So the covenant is modeled after Dunkin' Donuts on Route 125 in Butcherboy Market.
That one seemed pretty innocuous. Is anyone that wants to talk about that? Excellent. Anybody have any questions, comments? I think we pretty thoroughly vetted that the last time. So it's something that we'll definitely support when it's time to vote. Okay.
Okay.
Is that something, should we vote now, or should we wait to do them?
let's-
Why don't we wait to
let's-
do them all together?
yeah, I'd
when
rather
we-
do them all together.
All right, we'll do them all together when all the
Typically, you'll
articles
carry
are
it
ready.
if needed.
Yeah,
So,
do a couple of, hi?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, Don Bornstein, I represent Jane O'Donnell, the owners of that property.
Okay.
I do have the signed covenant with me tonight,
Fantastic.
so if we're going to go home now, I want to make sure I leave the covenant with Jean.
That would be great.
Right. If you have any questions for us, Jane and Rich are here as well, but it sounds like you don't.
No, I think we went over this a couple of meetings ago, so, this is an opportunity if any members of the public have issues. I'm not seeing why there would be. I think everything is well in order, and we appreciate the cooperation.
All right, thank you very much.
What's that?
Gordon Development.
Corridor development, yes. To amend the zoning bylaw, Article 16, corridor development district, permitted uses to allow for drive-through facilities for banks within CDD1 and CDD2 zoning districts by special permit, and to amend the dimensional requirements within CDD2 zoning district. Again, this is one we've had a lot of discussion on. Certainly anyone who wants to make statements. We have a proposed warrant article, Jean, that corresponds with everything that we've gone over and redlined in the past?
Yes, so
Okay.
what you agreed to at the last meeting primarily was to allow for banks with drive-through facilities by special permit, and there were some dimensional changes as well in CDD 2 to make them more consistent with CDD 1.
So we would allow, so the CDD 2, we went from 2 acres to 1 acre, correct?
Yep.
As the minimum lot requirement, still requires in most, if not all, most of the places in CDD 2 to kind of join lots together. Any drive-through bank would be by special permit. There had been a request by the developer who was interested in one of these parcels to do drive-through restaurants. We did not make any changes that would allow for that outside of what's currently allowed.
Right. And the drive-through bank facility was also amended in CDD 1 to allow for that use as well.
Okay,
And it was a use allowed by special permit.
Right,
correct.
exactly.
So anything would come back before us for a special permit. Okay. Alex, anything you want to add? Okay, anyone wish to speak on this one? And we've had a lot of discussion from neighbors, from developer, and taken a lot of time to kind of put this together, so we definitely appreciate all the comments that have come so far. Okay, so we'll continue that for an additional.
So your packet still had all the material you reviewed previously, just in case anybody's
Right.
starting to look now that it's a public hearing.
Right, so we will have additional public hearings on this. So if people wish to read the proposed warrant article, all the materials are online or available through the planning office. And if you have any questions, we will have additional public meeting and town meeting on this as well. Okay? Earth material removal?
So again, you briefly heard this one. This article really represents a bylaw that has been in existence. It's Article 5, so it's been there for a very long time regarding earth material removal. This article proposes to add some exceptions to that. The exceptions are consistent with the land disturbance permit, which has come in, several years after this adoption. The bylaw predates site plan review, the Wetlands Protection Act, and land disturbance permit, which really requires the same review that is being listed as exception, so that somebody would not have to apply for both of these permits. The bylaw stays in existence in the event that a development or a proposal does come before the building commissioner where it may not meet any of the requirements, not more than an acre of disturbance, not requiring site plan review, and maybe not a wetland, where he would still have authority to enact some of the provisions in this bylaw.
Okay. Anybody? Sounds great. Public? Great.
It's really an attempt to streamline permitting if somebody was to call for both of these type of permits.
Okay. Yeah, not earth-shattering. Okay. So we got 2 left. We have 495 Main Street and 4 High Street. So somebody's got to go last. These are both going to take a long time, so whoever has to wait, I apologize. We'll start with 495 Main Street. I think there are more people here for that. We just got to do one then the other. So we'll do 495 Main Street, Town of North Andover, application for a special permit. Site plan review under section 195-8.1 through 8.17 and 195-10.7 of the Town of North Andover zoning bylaw. The applicant proposes to construct a recreational complex including athletic fields, tennis courts, picnic areas, and associated parking areas, walkways, and emergency maintenance access paths located in the R4 zoning district. So just to kind of summarize where we are and what we're doing, this has to do with the new proposed recreational complex. So town meeting gave almost $7 million towards this complex at the last go-around. There's been many public meetings regarding the fields and how best to use this and how to set this up. What we are here for is site plan review, so we are not here to say yes project, no project, things like that. We're here to give our conditions for how we think the site should be laid out. We have had a lot of discussion, and we'll really try to focus tonight on lighting, traffic, and construction.
Construction phasing, yeah.
Okay, I think those are the three things, okay? What we'll do first, the way this is going to work, we'll hear from our consultants hired by the town. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Give us an update of where we've come since the last time we were here. I think we'll then take questions or comments from members of the board. Then we will go to members of the public to make any questions or comments. Again, those are the kind of three topics that I'd really like to focus on. If you have questions, address them to the board. However many questions you have, get them all out, and we'll call back up our consultants to answer those questions. Okay, that's where we'll go. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for the time tonight. If I can make just one suggestion, you've accurately summarized where we are. For efficiency's sake, we're bringing new information to the table in response to questions from the last meeting. It'd be nice if we could stick to new comments as well, because we've heard an awful lot, especially in the last 20 meetings that we've had on the project and the planning board meetings as well. So if we could stick to new answers, new questions, that would, I think, make this a little bit more efficient.
Sure, I mean, to the
Experience
extent that I think people have questions that they don't feel have been answered, even if they've been asked before, I'm
Right.
going to give them some leeway there. But I do agree that there are certain, that we want to focus on the kind of the new questions that arose and really on the lighting,
Right.
which I think we've had some really good questions and concerns brought up, and I think have hopefully had to addressed. I think we've had a lot of discussion about it, which has been good, and made some changes. Same thing with construction and with traffic. And so please address anything new, both that was addressed by members of the public, as well as meetings with the town that you've had and changes that you are suggesting.
Sure. And then the only other suggestion or request is that as you get into the public comment period, if it's helpful, it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to address things as we go, because if, depending on the length and the breadth, sometimes it's hard to remember the first question when we're on question 10 or 11.
Sure.
So it just helps to make the flow a little bit easier, maybe help reduce the amount of overall discussion.
All right.
If we can. So with that in mind, we're here tonight to talk about lights and about construction access and egress and traffic. These first slides are simply to use as summary reference points. There's nothing new here. This is the same information we presented before. If you keep going right, this is the proposed condition. And then here, this is what we call a lumens plan, a lighting level plan. This is produced by our lighting manufacturer. They are the experts when it comes to the distribution of light and the safety and the use of the fields based on the light levels that are required. And so the blue line, these are all numbers that are in foot candles. And so what we've also got on here are yellow circles show pedestrian lights that are go directly adjacent to a proposed pedestrian walkway. That walkway is an integral part of the overall use, access, and safety of the facility.
Can you orient us first where we are on this first
Oh,
map?
I'm sorry. This is the proposed softball, Little League baseball field.
And can we just scroll back one just so everyone knows where we're,
Yep,
can you
so
just show us where
this
that is?
the top part of that,
Very top.
yep,
Very
the
Okay.
green, yep,
Thank you.
the area that abuts the neighborhood.
Okay, so if we go back to the photometric
Right.
plan.
Good point. Sorry, I should have made that
That's okay.
clear when I started. So you can see kind of behind all the numbers, you see the diamond and the infield. You also see the circle at the bottom of this slide, which is the midfield of the soccer field. And then the diagonal line cutting across with the circles every inch or so, that's a fence line. So that's the boundary between neighbor's property and project property. The yellow dots are pedestrian scale lights. Those are, how tall are those poles?
They're 25.
25 feet high. And then the black kind of small rectangles are the field lights that will light up the softball and the soccer field. And these numbers all represent lighting levels in lumens. And just to give everybody a perspective on what a lumen is, 0.4 on the lumen scale is the equivalent of moonlight. So a dark sky with the moon out. And as you can see, what we've drawn here, that blue line is that's the moonlit line. So when the lights are on, that blue line shows where 0.4 foot candles of light end. Everything below that line, you can see how the numbers gradually start to increase until you get to the field of play, where you see numbers like 28 and 26 and 25 and 42. Those are directly under the lights. Why? Because we're illuminating the field of play for use. But as you see, as you get to the fence line, it drops down to 2.0, and then within about 10 feet of the fence, 0.4, which is moonlight. So if you go to the next slide, this slide, we have subtracted the pedestrian lights out of the illumination level analysis. So even though we show the lights on the plan just for orientation purposes, all the numbers have been adjusted to only account for the lights that are used for play, for the athletic use of the field. And so what the difference between these two plans shows is that the moonlight, the amount of light given off by the lights drops by about half in terms of distance or spread across the fence line. And so that moonlight line is practically at the fence. From the site visit that you saw at the Greater Lawrence Voc Tech, that light spill, and from the photos that we'll show you after this and the photos we showed before, these lights, as I mentioned, have a special cutoff feature built into the lens that drops the light vertically down and out onto the field of play. And so what these numbers show through the analysis of a lighting engineer is that that's exactly what's happening. Where the lights are, it drops vertically, there's darkness on one side, and a lit field of play on the other side. That was borne out at the visit to the Greater Lawrence Vocational Technical School, and it's also borne out by the photos that I'll show you on the next slide. So these are photos that we showed the last time around, but it's good to emphasize this is what we're talking about.
Where is
So
this?
This is
I'm not sure these are representative sites.
these were given to us by the lighting manufacturer.
So this is not the vote? This is
No.
not somewhere that was visited?
Same lights, so these are the lights we're using on this project, and the same effect. So you can see the fence, that's roughly 10 feet away from the photographer. That big vertical dark line is in fact a light pole that's illuminating the field where it's lit up, and underneath the light pole is dark. So this is the same effect that we will have at the project site. If we go to the next slide. Same type of thing. You see the light, it's clearly lighting onto the field of play, but directly under that light, there is no light spill onto that property. On the next slide, same type of thing. One thing I want to point out that was a little apples and oranges was that I think the board took some folks to the Merrimack College site. That is not a site that we recommended going to, simply because the Merrimack College site is also trying to light up, specifically trying to light up the pedestrian area around the field for pedestrian use. This is the opposite here. We're only trying to light that path, that walking path. We are not trying to light up past where the poles are. And so the visit to Merrimack was artificial, was really not what we're proposing as part of our project. The Greater Lawrence site was exactly what we were proposing. And that's why we went to great pains to give you that as an example, because our lighting manufacturer said that was almost identical to the product that we're going to be using and the type of application in terms of what the product is trying to do and not do. at the site.
So, but on that, I think it's important to actually see both, right? To see the difference. I mean,
That
I know you want us
sure.
to see what's most like what you're proposing, but I think to see the difference is important.
As long as people understand that what we're not proposing what you saw at Merrimack.
Okay.
We're proposing what we saw at Greater
You've,
Lawrence.
you've said that pretty
Okay.
clearly, so if that hasn't been heard, then
Okay.
it hasn't been heard. But
Okay.
you have said that pretty clearly. But I think when we have something in our own backyard, I think it's important that we see it at a minimum for comparison.
Sure,
Are there
that
any
makes sense.
fields that back up to neighborhoods that you could share with us or that you know of have been developed?
We could do some more research on that. I think at the end of the day, we're looking to see what light's coming off the pole. It almost doesn't matter if there's a house there or an open field.
No, it actually, it really does. That's-
Well, if it's,
that's a
but if
big
it's,
difference.
but if it's dark on the side of the pole, I mean,
No, but I would still challenge that it is a big difference.
in what way?
And there's gonna be a walking trail right there as well, so you know those candle lights that you showed earlier will be lit, just because it backs up to so close to a residential area.
Right.
It doesn't matter, all these fields are athletic fields. Doesn't matter if there's dormers in the background or just public school buildings, but it's not a neighborhood. I mean, Andover Field, I guess we could consider, because they redid their fields, and it's a lot, there's houses along that complex. In North Reading, I don't know if you visited their sports complex, but it's outside of, it's Ipswich River Park, that might be a nice one to look at. There's residential, but it's far from the fields, so.
I don't understand the comparison, though. If it's dark on if it's dark on one side of the light pole and the field is lit, if there's a house there or a barn, what's the difference?
The difference is it's a house.
No, I understand, but if it's dark,
We'd like to see that, that's all.
but you
I
saw...
think it's worth researching.
Well, but I'm struggling to understand the difference, because if you saw Greater Lawrence and you saw that on the other side of the poles, it was dark,
But I'd like to see it, I'd like to go to a field that might back up to a neighborhood. I think it would show a difference.
but it wouldn't.
I disagree,
I think what Lori's getting at is it would be reassuring.
yeah.
Well, I understand, but from a logic standpoint, I don't understand.
I
if there's-
understand what you're saying.
You don't, I mean,
A number's a number, you know, the amount of lights.
well,
the amount of light.
if there's light there, there's light there. If there's no light there, I mean, I could put a farm over there. It wouldn't change the fact that the light is not hitting the farm.
So why don't we, just to kind of call an audible, I liked your idea earlier of talking about specific issues, so why don't we why don't we do questions about lighting? We'll do these in stages, so let's
Sure.
do lighting. So if anyone here has Lori's comments, we're
I have
great.
a question.
So let's question about lighting, then we'll go to members of the public. If you want to talk about lighting, just because you talk about lighting, you can come back and talk about something else if you want later on, but we'll just do these topic by topic, that way maybe we can.
Can you go back one photo? One more. Oh, no, I'm sorry, advance. All right, next one, right there, yeah. So, I did go to both site visits, Merrimack and Greater Lawrence. I take your point about Merrimack, I agree, it's good for us to compare, but
Sure.
it's important to note that Merrimack is a different example. They're trying to light the
Right,
dorm
right.
areas. However, when I went to Lawrence Vocational, I mean, you just said that this is what you're gonna do. And I thought at Lawrence Vocational, the drop-off of light was very dramatic. But I don't think it was literally this much. This photo, and I can't tell how much of this is the photo, but although Lawrence Vocational, you could really see the lights directed towards the field. It wasn't as much of a cutoff as this. And are you saying that this is what you're gonna deliver? Because this is better than what I saw at Lawrence Vocational.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're gonna do better than Lawrence Vocational if that's the way you describe this photo.
Well, so we need to go back to the light levels, because the proof is in the numbers. So the lighting levels that I showed you, the lumens plan, it does show a moonlit area.
Okay,
10
I
feet
can
on.
interpret those numbers.
Yep.
And I agree that the numbers are objective. But when you give us a photo to look at,
Yep.
that is a powerful impression. And the photo you're showing me, in my opinion, is better than what I saw at Lawrence.
Yep.
So I just want to know, is that photo what you're gonna,
That's the quality of the light levels that are going to be provided.
that's impressive.
So, but I think it also depends on which photo you're looking at.
Well, no, I was
Right.
specifying which.
No, I know, but I'm saying the one you just looked at is really dark.
Yeah.
And the one behind it, like if you go to the next one, so that's one, if you go to the next one after this, I think, it's still pretty dark, but it's a little bit less. Yeah, so I think some of that might have been the angle, but
I mean, even this photo, you can see distinctly where the line is, and
Right.
where it's dark and where it's light. And the light fixtures are very good. They've come a long way since the lights that are on the field today.
So I have a question on the numbers. On the L1 plan that shows the combined sports field and walkway lighting,
Yep.
there are a few values outside the fence that, and there's a couple of houses back there from the site plan, so that's
Yep.
why I asked the question. That are
Yep.
2.8, 2.0, 3.2. Can you describe what that quality of light is for people who, maybe we have those homeowners in the audience tonight? Can you describe near the fence what that value is? Could you compare that value to something that
Yeah,
we know?
I'm trying to think what's between, full light and the moonlight, which is the opposite end of the extreme. Well, so didn't you say 4 is the equivalent of being
Park,
under a street light? So if you see where the yellow circles are, you'll see numbers like 3.0, 4.4, 4.0. That's the equivalent of being under a light in a parking lot. So that's a 4.0 number. You're under the light's above you, you're getting the light. It's not the athletic field light, so it's not nearly as strong and not nearly as bright, but you're still in the you could read a book by it, because we're trying to light up the area for pedestrian safety. So that's full 4.0. You go from 4.0 down to 0.4, which is the moonlight. So that would be the intermediate reference point, so to speak.
now, has there been any discussions about, you said those pedestrian lights also add light?
They do.
About changing the style of some of those to mitigate some of that?
Well, so we have a professional concern. We can reduce the height of the pole from 20 to 15. You could even go as high as 10 or as low as 10, and that's going to reduce how far it would go. We've also asked the manufacturer, I should have mentioned this earlier, on the pedestrian lights. Pedestrian lights for the shield?
Yes, they're on the LEDs. It's not a back shield.
So what we can do is reduce the height of the pole to reduce these light levels and pull that blue line even further. In our opinion, you start to run into less light that's available for the safe use of the walkway. And safety is kind of an objective term. This is inaccessible area. It's the most remote part of the footprint, right? Hardest to get to. And so we feel that's a more vulnerable place in terms of going dark. Now, I know we're not talking about going dark, but when, that is kind of the direction you're going. Can we reduce the pedestrian light levels? We can. We could even go to the extreme of putting in a series of bollard lights, which bollards are about 4 feet tall. Those light up the walkway. The problem we have professionally with those is that they're very susceptible to vandalism, and because they're baseball bat height,
Baseball field?
or some other object, right? And before you know it, half of them are out.
So 20 to 15, is there,
20 to 15, 20 to 10. You could even eliminate every other light, right? And so really reduce the amount of light. And so that's a balancing act that we can work with you on. We just feel like we'd begin to compromise some of the pedestrian safety. And then you create another problem where you've got activity there that I think the neighbors and others wouldn't want to see there in the first place. So the light provides an element of visibility that you can see remotely, which is in and itself a deterrent for activity. So that helps, so there's a balancing act
How
there.
much of that can be done in the field?
Well, so the problem within the field is that we, the town, would end up having, if we make a change like this, which we can, is that we end up buying the fixture, paying for it, and now maybe not using it, maybe getting charged a restock credit, or maybe eating the fixture altogether.
Putting it somewhere else?
We could try to put it someplace else. You know, the idea of maybe removing every other light or reducing the height, these are things that I think we could easily do now and not have to worry about
Okay.
whether it costs us money because we're wasting the fixture.
Is it, go ahead.
A little bit different type of question. I realize that you haven't figured out operationally all the hours and so forth, but can you give a kind of a rough ballpark of the timing at which the lights would be on? Is it going to be an every day of the week thing? Is it going to be 10 months a year? And again, I'm not trying to press you for the exact dates, but I'm trying to
Yeah.
put it in context.
Well, when, oh, yeah,
I can-
please, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
If you don't mind.
Sure, go
Hi,
ahead.
Regina Keen, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I came specifically to comment on this point because I know in our last meeting, in your last meeting, the same question was raised. And former town manager Andrew Miller made the suggestion and commitment to the establishment of a committee that would, residents would have a representation on that committee to advise on the hours of operation of the fields and the lights. And I know he put that in writing and provided it to you and suggested that could be a part of one of your conditions. And I'm here to say, even though he's no longer here, the Board of Selectmen is fully supportive of that idea. I think that makes great sense to allow residents an opportunity to influence that as we go forward. And we will fully back that and support that and would expect that to be a condition, anticipating that to be a condition.
So do you have a thought on, so your thought would be conditioning having a committee, but not necessarily conditioning any set times or things like that?
No, having a committee.
All right, and so you're still kind of open and looking to figure out those times?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I'd like to add too, in terms of helping mitigate the pedestrian light, is that, maybe go back to the green, the color rendered plan. Yeah, that one. So this plan doesn't do a good job of showing it. We've got some landscaping up against the fence, but, you know, arborvitaes can be really tall, and if you pile them next to each other or put them in a line, they can be a real nice green wall of sorts. I think some transparency is good, just to let sight lines through, but enough to strategically create that barrier, if you will, and give some extra privacy, and also absorb the light at that lower level, which is being driven by the pedestrian lights. And so that really, that moonlight line is really only at the fence line, and the pedestrian line is being rebuffed by the vegetation. And that's something that we can easily add to this plan and make adjustments easily in the field.
So that's something where we could keep the lights.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
add trees specifically to places where there
Right.
are
And-
concerns.
And what I like about the light, I mean, the tree plan is that we can start with a certain group, get everyone's opinion, does this work, yes or no, okay, no, go get some more, and start to fill it in, and gradually until we get to a point where people are satisfied what it looks like and how it functions.
Is it fair to characterize the taller lights that illuminate the playing field as directional lights?
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
exactly what they are.
For the pedestrian walkway lights, are those also directional in the same sense of the term? Or are the pedestrian walkway lights more
You know, spreads,
spread?
no, they're the same.
They're directional?
Yeah, we've done everything we can within the lens of the fixture itself to be as directional and low impact as possible.
On the
On the
pedestrian walkway?
Yeah, on the pedestrian side as well, yes. In fact, we've, if you go back to the pedestrian plan, the lighting plan, we even thought about moving the lights, those yellow dots, to the other side of the walkway, further away from the boundary with the residents. But what that does is that actually
the other way.
shows the light towards them. Right now, the light has its back to the neighborhood, pushing light in. So really we've got the fixture that is the least impactful.
And can you orient me on this diagram? Where are portions of property inside that blue line, between the blue line and the fence?
Well, so anything outside the fence is private property. I don't know where the individual lot boundaries are.
Yeah, because to the earlier point, I mean, a lot of this is very impressive, the drop off to below Moonlight, but along that fence line, there are some, there's a 3.2 and a 3.6, and I don't want to get into this level of detail, but
We'll go to the next
it's
slide, because when you see
cautioning us, right?
Yeah, well, so look, this is the slide to look at, because when you subtract the pedestrian lights out, it drops way down.
Would there be an occurrence with pedestrian lights are not on and only
That's
the
what I'm
field
saying.
lights?
So, this is one extreme, and if we did the bollards, you'd be at about this level. But then there's the trade-offs. I'm not saying that the bollards are a bad idea. I'm just saying that it produces a benefit, but then comes with a potential maintenance issue where if they get vandalized, you now have to chase your tail a little bit, and maybe that's a fair trade.
And there's no other more directional version of pedestrian walkway lighting that would maintain the same safety margin but reduce the light spillage from the pedestrian lights beyond the fence?
Not to this level, no. The bollards would get you almost identical to this. And so you'd have almost no light, just moonlight spillage onto the private property.
But you have safety concerns about those, correct?
Well, it's not the best, but you're still providing light in an area that's going to be used for pedestrians. I would prefer, if it were my daughter walking home at night at 8:30, I would want more light there.
Right. And people are going to be leaving the fields and walking. Okay. All right. Anybody else have questions up here? So why don't we, if anyone wants to come make comments or questions, but we're going to do lighting right now. Again, if you want to have comments about lighting, come up, and then we'll do traffic next. Okay. All right. Anyone have lighting comments, questions? All right.
We are a couple.
Everyone else has to come up as couples too then. All right. All right, please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, I'm Joe Reardon and
Kim Reardon.
62 Parker Street. And I thank you for the opportunity to be heard tonight. I appreciate the work of the board on this and all the projects you work on. And I know there have been a number of hearings, as you alluded, and meetings that have been held by various boards and groups on this, regarding this project. That's greatly appreciated as well. My wife, Kim, and a number of the neighbors here have attended virtually every one of those public meetings. And I thank you for doing that. Kim's kept me very well informed, but this is the first time I've had the opportunity to speak on it. So I just want to say right from the beginning that I very much support the project. I played sports not all my life. I played sports as a kid, greatly benefited from it. Our children played in this town, baseball, softball, basketball, soccer, track, greatly benefited from that. So absolutely, I support improved quality facilities for this next generation and for generations to come. Strongly supported. Project of this magnitude, as you've all alluded, carries many different aspects that need to be looked at and carefully planned. That's what we're doing tonight. That's what's been being done throughout the process. The one aspect that we're addressing right now is lighting. I reviewed the minutes of the prior meetings, and I've seen references to studies and site visits and how the lights will be turned on and off and how they'll be directed, et cetera. But unless I missed it, and at the risk of taking a step backwards, I never saw the question of why do we need lights. And I'm drawing the distinction between safety, security lights, which I entirely support, and I would expect most anyone would, and field lights. One can easily conclude that the inclusion of lighting implies that there will be games on the fields and practices and other activities as well that will be taking place after dark. Why else would we need lights? So I need to take a step back and ask the question, why do we need lights? Why can't we improve the fields? And I mean really improve the fields. First class, #1 quality, the best you can get and play sports in the daylight. And again, huge sports person.
Can I take a stab at that one, or do you want to?
Well, let me just, if I
Okay.
could just finish out,
Sure.
again, I haven't had the chance to express myself, and so let me just do that, if you would allow. Thank you. I raise this reality because I raise this issue, I should say, because I think the reality of the impact of lighting was made much clearer at the site visits last week. My wife attended both of those visits. I came home from work last Wednesday night. I walked in the house. She had come in 5 minutes before me. The look on her face and what she told me was striking to me. Those of you who know her, she's very calm, very mild-mannered. She talked to me in the same manner, but what she expressed to me was the fact that she saw the dramatic impact this was going to have on our life in that neighborhood. And when I say our life, we're close. There are a lot of others who are a lot closer. And the references to the what's outside the fence line, what have you, is a serious issue, I think. I understand that the argument has been made that the direction of the lighting, and I respect that. I obviously respect the opinions of professionals, that it can be controlled and what have you. I will say I question it. I think, as was alluded in some of those pictures, our son is a film major. He can do a lot of things with pictures. So unless you walk there and you see it, the way Kim phrased it after the second visit was, it's less obnoxious. She didn't say it's good. She didn't say it's a dramatic improvement. She said it's less obnoxious. And that's supposedly the closest model we've seen so far as to what we're driving at here. We currently, as we stand here tonight, we have a beam of light shooting into our living room from the Atkinson School. Now, that's a security light. Again, I understand the reasoning for it. We should have those lights. Why a security light at the Atkinson School on Massachusetts Avenue is shooting into my living room on Parker Street, that's beyond me. And again, other people live much closer and have a much bigger impact of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the care that needs to be taken in designing lighting, I think, is a very, very important one. So I'm opposed, frankly, to lighting the fields, the playing fields. I'm very much in favor of security lighting and safety lighting. Playing fields, I don't know why we need to do that. And I'm sure there's, this day and age, it's modern, what have you, and I'm not going to dispute that. But I think with really top-quality fields, our young people can have a magnificent experience and have it during daylight hours. Just quickly in closing, beyond that, there are other big impacts of lighting. People have said, oh, well, you live in that neighborhood. You live, where there's schools and there's fields. You got to know there's going to be lighting. There's going to be expansion and development. And I find validity in that, absolutely. But I also want to make clear, and I think people understand this, the people of this neighborhood, and this is a residential neighborhood, it's zoned as a residential neighborhood, make a lot of sacrifices for this town in terms of traffic. We'll get into, I know we're going to get into traffic, but the school traffic, the non-school events that take place at in the complex, if you want to call it that, specifically on Parker Street. I know it's been talked about. We have people who don't obey the signs and whatever else. The marching band, and in the interest of full disclosure, my daughter was the 4-year marching band person. We love it. It was music, quote unquote, not literally music to our ears, but it's loud. All right, and I know other people don't like that so much. I won't go into all the others except for one, which is Sunday sports. I think we take for granted. We live in the neighborhood. Virtually from the minute school closes until dark, there's going to be an activity there. Fine. Saturday's going to be a busy day. The latest is Sunday morning on Parker Street, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, car doors slamming, kids getting out, lots of loud noise, the activity beginning, and it's 7:30 in the morning on Sunday. All right? So my point in all of this is the impact that this has on this neighborhood. And when you add lighting to that now allows that impact to go to, Mr. Simons asked the question, do we know what the hours are going to be? We don't know those hours. And unless those hours are put into this special permit, a group of people come along, and there are a couple of committee members from the neighborhood. Well, there's 6 other people on the committee, and those 6 other people might not care so much about the neighborhood. So I think all of this impacts lighting, and I would just ask you, my specific question, which I know you want, is Why do we need lighting on the playing fields, not security lighting, on the playing fields? So, and I'll let Kim speak.
You wanted to take a stab
Well,
at it
just,
before.
just two things. I mean, obviously, we're having these discussions because we're mindful of the impact on the neighborhood. But at the same time, we're also mindful of the goals and benefits that this could have for the town, as you discussed. And those are the things we have to weigh. And so in terms of, people on a committee, they're not just, there will be some focus on what effects and how to mitigate those, but also what's best for the town as a whole. And that's what we do on every single project, right? That's kind of the goal of why you have people that are more neutral, right? And we can't vote on things that are, directly
Right.
impacting our property. So in terms of the timing, I think it's just a matter of numbers of use, right? I mean, if your kids might play, we got marching band, we got soccer, we got baseball, we got softball, we got field hockey, we got football, and to go on and on and on. And especially during the week, if you're having practices during the week, in the fall, it's dark at 4:30, right? So you're getting out of school at 2:30. You just don't have time to put all of that without lighting. And if we're gonna have a state-of-the-art facility, if we want to make the best of it, I think that's why they have it at night.
Okay.
I wasn't involved in any of those discussions,
No.
but
No,
that's my assumption.
No, I appreciate that, and I understand that, but I guess we've done it to this point.
Right.
I coached all those teams, we had plenty of practices, and we got it done. And so unless, and I know the town has grown, but our kids, my daughter just graduated from high school last year, so it isn't that long ago. And unless the town has grown exponentially and continues to grow exponentially, which is another whole set of issues that the town needs to concern and needs to consider. And again, I'm saying all of this, I really want to make clear, I'm saying this as, I hope, a good citizen who loves this town and wants to see this town prosper. But why we can't have a beautiful facility and not have lights on athletic fields, which we don't have now, is a question that I think is
Can I ask
is
you,
worth
just in
questioning.
context, I do know that when the old football stadium, there were lights there for a period of years. How often were the lights on? And, I mean, like high school football,
They were all.
soccer?
No. Well, I think, I remember the first town meeting we ever went to, which was 29 years ago. And somebody got up and they said, well, here in Andover, and the place went crazy because the person had made a mistake. But the point that was kind of said to us after was, well, if you come back here 30 years from now, you're still a newcomer. Well, we've been here about 30 years. So I don't know the entire history, but my understanding is when those lights were put in, they were for football games, period. 5 or 6 a year. Now, to answer your question, I would say they were constantly on. They were on most nights, long into the night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, quite often. So, and that's my point about, I understand how we have to have flexibility, we have to do what's best for the town. But unless these things are decided and put in writing, time goes by and, oh, well, we'll do just this one thing, we'll do this other thing. The end result is those lights were on all the time. And I would ask, if others want to correct me or back me up on that, but that's certainly my impression of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, my understanding was that from hearing from neighbors that have been around is that the lights were only supposed to be on that field like 6 times a year and that they'd be shut off at the end of the game. And then they gradually kept adding more and more events there. And oftentimes the lights were left on all night because nobody knew who was in charge, of shutting off the lights. So to answer that direct question. Okay. So I know we're talking about lighting, so I will stick to that. There are a couple things that combined with the lighting are concerned. So first of all, I do want to second what Joe said about thank you to all of you for taking the time, especially taking the extra time to go to those site visits, okay? And it does, the visits are, they're significant. The old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A site visit is worth exponentially more words, okay? I also want to shout out to Regina Keene for coming out both nights. And she made a comment, and I hope it's okay, Regina, that I quote you, said, this is a different context. So we're standing there at the football field, and I understand what you said about the difference between the two sites, but that was the first impression. And there are no homes. next to Merrimack College football field. And Lori, I want to thank you for bringing up your question and kind of pushing it a little bit, because that's exactly what I was thinking. And we were standing in the middle of the field, and the designers were pointing out to the dark end of the field, saying, look how dark it is. And Regina and I both said, yeah, but you can't just stand here and look at the dark end of the field. You got to go down there. So we did. We walked down to the end of the field. And you can stand on the line where the light ends and the dark begins. You turn around, you're looking at all these lights, right? Okay? And what we're talking about here, what's being proposed for those neighbors that directly abut the fields, we're talking about layers of lights. You've got the pedestrian lights, then you've got the softball field lights, and then beyond that, you have the main multi-purpose field lights. We're not just talking about one field. So when we did the site visits, okay, there was Merrimack College football field, and then there was Greater Lawrence Technical School field. One field each, okay? This project is proposing 2 fields and pedestrian lighting. So we're talking about layers of lighting, okay? One of the other things that was mentioned at that site visit at Merrimack College that really caught my attention was someone pointed to the fact that the artificial turf can be plowed, okay? And as a matter of fact, last Wednesday night, so February 27th, dead of winter, there were students out there practicing on the field, okay? Combined with the lighting, the implication of this is that the fields could potentially be used day and night all year round, okay? This is a dramatic change from the current use, all right? Joe referred to this, and we have had, I guess, there is a palpable feeling that our homes and quality of life are somehow going to be offered as sacrifices in the pursuit of this project. That's how it feels. And I know that there's probably only like a couple dozen of us families that this affects, but, and to the people that said, well, you bought your home there, you should have known that this could have happened. Well, first of all, I can tell you that my family has owned our house since 1950. That was before there were schools and before there were fields, okay? So I'm not going to say that I was living there back then, but I wanted you all to think that I just looked really good for 80. But it was my grandparents, okay? But we do, so people are saying, well, you should have known, okay? But we live in R4 zoning district. While this district certainly allows for a more variety of uses, the zoning laws as currently written do afford us neighbors certain protections. The very fact that the proposed recreation complex requires a special permit is because it falls outside of the normal permitted use of the property. Okay? The lighting is the biggest factor with regard to the impact on our daily life. The purpose of the proposed lights is to simulate daylight. And there was more about that, but if you install fixtures to simulate daylight to extend the number of hours that the fields are used, this brings with it the accompanying noise, traffic, and parking issues. To kind of give a soundbite, more lumens equals prolonged decibels and traffic. Offers of buffers such as vegetation to mitigate the light and sound is somewhat, it's an unsatisfactory solution. Unless you put in 80-foot arborvitaes or build a wall, the proximity of our homes to the proposed lighting is unlikely to be mitigated enough to maintain our current quality of life. The light pollution is not just about what is spilling out beyond the fields, it's what we see when we look out our backyards. We already talked about, there was a question about who's going to decide okay, these things. My next biggest concern, and again, this is all related to lighting, the lack of details about the permitted hours, users, and management and maintenance of the complex is of great concern, okay?
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second.
Yep.
Again, I tried to say it earlier. Our job is site plan review. Ours is not really the site plan. So we can, I think we talked about conditioning and talking about a committee. I think that is bordering on the edge of what we can legally do in terms of a site plan. And I think we're willing to go that far, but establishing hours, I just don't know in terms of the lighting. I think that's somewhat overstepping our
Okay,
boundaries.
so I hear you. I have a rebuttal, for lack of a better term, for that, okay? When I was looking at what the responsibility or the permitted authority is of this board, I did find some interesting literature. I did make copies for all of you. If you're interested, I can hand it out.
Anything you want to submit, you can submit.
Okay.
But again,
So
we're talking about site plan review.
about what authority this board has in relation to what you were just talking about.
But in relation to site plan review or in relation to just our general authority?
I think it's,
Well, we can take it, I just,
okay.
But-
I mean, I guess you can tell me. You're much
Right.
more familiar with this.
right, so the whole point of site plan review is that there's already a project, there's already, it's really about not whether the use is going to be allowed, but how to condition that use. And so setting hours, I mean, we can certainly talk about it, but my feeling is that may be beyond our authority.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So in our decisions,
Yeah,
and this may be different, this may be
Right.
your point, but in our decisions, we do specify hours of, for example, construction.
hours of operation and noise and stuff like that, that is true.
But that would not extend to a condition for future operation?
I'm not so sure on site plan review and
Right.
special permits in general. It's close, that's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure.
mean, the problem ends up being with hours of operation and those sorts of things. Frankly, there's no way you're ever going to know in advance what the right answer is, so you have to wait. I mean, you just, we try it with building, well, should they end at 9 o'clock or 9:30? And you just can't tell. And practically speaking, as much as I know the Reardon suggested we bake it into the decision, I've never seen a case where it's worked, so.
Right, I think there's a difference between saying no construction after 11 o'clock and then regulating lighting where we just don't
But
necessarily know.
you can, but you're right, at some point you hit the kind of limit of your authority. There's also an element when you're dealing with a municipality that makes it a little bit different as well, so.
Right, and I think having your voices heard, that certainly people are talking about it. And yes, I can't predict what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now. I'm just hesitant to suggest putting conditions in that we're not fully legally allowed to do if there are other ways that we can do things that adequately address the issue.
Can I ask you to look at the third page then?
Sure.
Under number 2. So we're looking at the section called special permits.
All right.
And so, number 2, in approving a special permit, the special permit granting authority may attach such conditions and safeguards as are deemed necessary to protect the neighborhood, such as, but not limited to, the following. And then I'm going to just skip down to D. Limitation of size, number of occupants, method or time of operation, or extent of facilities. I read that as you guys absolutely have the authority to put conditions on it. That's the way I interpret it. I could be wrong.
Well, we do, but it's not unlimited. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, if you did it in a draconian way, I mean, we do this on any type of commercial facility with site plan review, so probably in the time that I've been on the board, you know, done probably like 100, 150 of them. There's a limit, even though a lot of this stuff is hortatory, that it basically says, look at this, but there are limits, that's my point, and we have an element of discretion to go in this. It's not easy, we tend to follow it, I think we try to look at it, I think we've listened pretty carefully to your points, we've raised some perspectives I hadn't really considered before, but we have to evaluate with the totality of things, what's the best solution.
No, I
think
appreciate,
that's fair. Yeah.
the position this puts you guys in, but just going back, to, the idea of establishing a committee afterwards, so you put in the facilities, and let's say you put in all these lights, and then there's going to be a committee formed afterwards. I feel like the toothpaste is already out of the tube at that point, and now it's almost like the argument is, well, we put this all in, so we should use it, right? It's like a catch-22.
No, I understand your point, but I guess the point I had been making about this is that if you try to put in your decision very explicit timeframes, you're just about always going to guess wrong, and you're going to be proven wrong in the future because reality has a way of intruding. I understand your point, and I think you bring up a very valuable one, is that you don't want it to be open-ended and people forget about it. You want your serious considerations about problems and issues to be addressed carefully. And, I would, and I think I'm glad Regina's here because, in fact, I think she takes it seriously as well. And I would think that when they put together a committee for this stuff, that they would try to do it in a way that's a little bit different, that it's more of a standing committee as opposed to a one-time thing.
Yeah, and I don't question the good intentions of everyone that's here right now. The problem is, like, I'll use Mr. Mailer as an example. He was great. And I know that he was instrumental in ushering this project through. And he gave us wonderful assurances, and I was actually very comforted by that. And then he left, okay? So, just saying, right?
So I'm just going to end with, because I think we do need to let other people talk.
I know.
It would be very difficult for us to say 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock. If we were to take your husband's suggestion, either say no lights or yes lights, that's actually an easier decision, right? than we can
Okay.
make. I'm not saying we're going to say no lights, but
Okay.
to say 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30 as a hard and fast rule, we're going to get it wrong for somebody at some point, whether it's a late game that goes over, whether it's, and then what are the repercussions if it doesn't happen, right, to the town? I don't know the answer, all right? So say we say 9:30 and the lights don't go off at 9:30. Now what? Who polices that? So it would be very difficult for us as a board to police that. So there are a lot of hurdles. We'll think about it and we'll talk about it and I'll research it. I just don't know that that's feasible for us. Setting a group responsible for it and having them report to us, that may be something that would be more workable.
I just want to remind the board that you reviewed criteria and design guidelines under 8.15 does clearly state what your authority is, and you could look at things such as, screenings, other methods of mitigation to lessen adverse impact. But this does not indicate hours per se, but again, you have design guidelines available to you, again,
Well,
under.
I'll tell you what, I'll look into it and see what we have the authority to do, because I'm hesitant for practical reasons to set hours, but we'll look and see what legal authority we have to, just to know.
And I don't mean to be contrary, but you just said you're hesitant to set hours. We're hesitant for there not to be set hours because.
No, I'm hesitant for our board to set hours. Someone should set hours, but I don't think it's us.
Yeah, but, so if I may just last
I know
comment
what
on
you're
this, okay? What I see, I call it the creep effect, okay? So the committee might decide, all right, lights out 9 o'clock, right? But then there's this like, oh, well, we have these groups that want to rent the fields, and it now is the potential source of revenue, okay? So now it's this temptation to bring in more revenue versus the quality of life of the couple dozen abutters, right? And I know we're beating a dead horse, but I cannot emphasize to you strongly enough that this is the conundrum you all face because this recreation complex is being proposed smack dab next to a neighborhood. And that's the problem. If this were in the middle of Sharpner's Pond field,
But
would
that-
not be an issue,
right, but
right? I
We
understand,
are
but,
where we are.
yeah,
So
So-
I'd like to ask, if I could, of the chair,
Yeah.
that this, to me, is a very intriguing point of why lights. And I had not thought of that before, and I'll admit I'm relatively new to this project. I know there's been 20-odd meetings. I haven't had the benefit of that, but I just, for the chairman, before we're done with this, not tonight, but the process, I would like to hear from the project visionaries, not the engineers, but the town
We
visionaries.
can get the fields committee.
I would love to hear why, if we don't have lights now, what was the thinking to have lights for this project? It may be something that I'm just not aware of, and it's really persuasive, but I think it's a great question, and I would like to hear the answer to that.
Well, let's see if we can get it.
Rick Green, I was the chairman for the Middle School Fields Committee approval. From the very beginning, the whole idea of this project was to enrich that area and encourage more participants in that area, from all age groups, from sports groups right up to the senior citizens. There's always been an intent to have lights there that was never hidden. We've had a meeting in December of 2016. We've always preached that we wanted lights on both fields. Now, one of the reasons we want lights in the field is obviously for more field use. We have a shortage in town of fields. We are eventually going to lose the Osgood fields. We have brought on some new fields in the past few years, but we do have a shortage of fields right now. You can ask Mr. Cooperstein from the Booster Club, who can speak to that highly. And as you know, spring sports at the high school, take for instance the baseball team, their field is deplorable right now. Artificial turf allows them to play at that facility, where they sometimes lose a lot of their games at the high school field because of its conditions. They end up playing at Grogan's, which is also now out of service because of Columbia Gas trailers there. The softball field, as you know, softball team does not have a home field at the high school. They presently play at McAvoy Field, and that's all three levels, varsity, junior varsity, and the freshmen. They are also interested in using this field. I understand the abutters' concerns, and you can ask them. We've been working with them since meeting number 1, taking into their comments into consideration. We've never been disingenuous about lighting on the fields. We understand their concern. I'll go as far as to say we've actually spoken about internally with the subcommittee about hours of operation for the lights for the softball field and the main athletic field. And again, we've never been disingenuous about that. That has always been the intent, to have those fields lighted. We are trying to encourage more use of this area, which is underutilized right now. We do appreciate the abutters' concerns, and we have been trying to work with that. I've worked closely with the designer Waterfield on this, as well as the committee and Mr. Mailer. We've always made a commitment not to have construction traffic or anything like that on our neighborhood streets. We've worked with the abutters about the Parker Street gate. I've actually personally even sent an email to the chief of police asking for stepped-up patrols in the morning and afternoon to make sure that no one is egressing through the Parker Street gate. So we have been trying to reach out to the abutters. We do have a shortage of fields in town. And, I don't know if you played high school sports, one of the great things about playing under lights is you don't get to play that often, and it is a great value to the student athlete.
Could I just have a follow-up question? So, and I am a native of town, so
Sure.
class 75. So,
That is, put you at age what?
27. All the work you've done bringing something like this forward, congratulations. What a huge, wonderful effort. When you're talking about trying to leverage, more of a resource here, was there ever any thought of lighting for the east side fields, which are not tucked into a neighborhood, but not lighting for the west side fields, which are tucked into a neighborhood. And I'm just asking if that type of alternative scenario was maybe part of the discussions through all the, visioning.
Well, back in the beginning, Waterfield did come up different conceptual designs, which we vetted through on a lower level as to what was best. There is an existing, if you want to call it T-ball field or instructional league baseball field there. So that's why we kept it over there. And also, the designer tried to utilize the space as efficiently as we could. As someone mentioned, we have a lot crammed into the front of the facility at Route 125. And a lot of those activities that are there is because they're easily patrolled by the police. They're close to 125. Some of that activity is away from the abutters. So that's why you have that cluster of different activities out towards the Route 125 side. So we did the designer did put some thought in it, and believe me, it was vetted through the committee. Again, I hate to stress this again, but we also had 21 of these public meetings. We actually specifically had one at the middle school for the abutters. And again, I think the abutters can attest to it as much as they probably want to shoot me right now, but we've tried to work with them and address their comments. And I actually walked over there Saturday. I walked all along the property line. I took a look. I made a suggestion to the designer that maybe we should look at a little bit more screening. And again, we had discussions about the ball lighting. Again, they don't provide the light and security that the proposed lights do, but it is a concession to help with the abutters. So we're trying to work with the abutters. We understand they live there. I don't live there. And we want to be a good neighbor. And as for the formation of a committee to oversee this facility, that's something we've talked about since 2015. We always knew that we would need a separate committee to oversee this. When McAvoy Field came online, which was the same design as I was involved with that project, we had multiple uses between the Booster Club, high school softball, and NASA. It became an issue of who was going to maintain certain things. We ran into some issues with that, so we had our growing pains on that field. So we understood from the beginning of this project that there would need to be a separate committee to oversee this. And I think Mr. Mailer expressed that through his email to the board and as well at the last planning board meeting. And even though he is gone, we still have his emails and his commitments to deal with the traffic on Parker Street, although it's outside of this project, but we understand that's a concern that needs to be addressed, as well as the management of this facility.
If I can ask, I'm not as familiar with like the history, but with all those 21 meetings and the neighbors, representing, and this might go back too far because you're so far along in this, but was there any location that was selected other than this? I mean, I agree these fields could be better utilized, so maybe they do get, spruced up, but a project of this scale shoehorned in there with 3 schools and plus an addition to the potential middle school at some point, like, it just seems like it's taken away from what these fields actually need to do for the town.
Well, actually, the proximity of the schools actually adds to this facility. Because
You take that and put it out somewhere, like whether it's Osgood, Sharpners, I've seen these complexes not shoehorned in the way, what we're doing with the addition of the kindergarten. I don't see the benefit. I see it as a distraction, quite honestly.
Well, I respectfully disagree with you.
Well, I just
When the
want, you
kindergarten,
just answer my question, was there any other location that was thought of?
yes, Sharpness Pond is very wet. It has problems with wetlands out there.
Yeah.
Osgood is not available to the town. This was a town-controlled piece of property, all by the schools. However, that was transferred to the ownership of the town through town meeting vote last year.
I think one of the other things, Rick, is that whole area complex was already used for athletic purposes,
Correct.
but I think it was universally acknowledged that it was extremely inefficiently being used.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had the circuits there over the years, and as you know, the circuits, when they come in, did a lot of damage to the field. So one of the reasons we went to the turf is because of the use. Also, if you're familiar with the Sharpness Pond field and the high school field, you know that there's a geese problem out there. There's a lot of geese droppings on those fields, and obviously artificial turf doesn't have that problem. and it also stands up to the wear and tear. If we were to look at a grass fields in those situations, we'd probably be looking at the middle school field in the condition it is now in probably a couple of years. So we'd be, spending a lot of money on maintenance and never really achieving a good product.
So why don't it's been good discussion, why don't we see it? Does anyone have points that haven't been raised yet?
Can I- If I could just.
Yeah,
there was
oh,
one-
well, go ahead, and then we'll get someone else.
So there's one thing that, kind of listening between the lines. We focused our energy tonight on that drop-off point and the lumen levels. But Kim mentioned an interesting point, and that is, well, I can still see off in the distance from my house a lit-up field. And that gives a distinctly different impression. Even though you might have a dark yard or a moonlit yard, you still see a bright ball of light out in the distance, which is the athletic fields that are supposed to be lit. And so you've got kind of a natural conflict built into this discussion, even though it may not be articulated in that specific way, right? We're focusing our battle over the light lines, and it's almost like, tomato, tomato, right? When you have an impasse like this, recreation complex always has been, always will be, wants to be more heavily used. The town's growing, will always continue to grow, need that kind of intensity of use. Really, the best place to land on this is a robust set of mitigation that will give each party a little bit of what they want. Anytime you're at an impasse like this, neither side's going to get exactly what they want, but if there's a compromise where people get a little bit of a little bit of something, I can't get it right. Then you'd have a win. And as I said earlier, and Rick discussed it, and there was even some discussion earlier, we could create a green wall. We could come in with arborvitaes. We could come in with a variety of different vertical elements that stay evergreen. That could include a structural element that's not natural and a natural element, so that you have that wall, so that from the living room, from the bedroom, you have to crane your neck to get over the trees to see the glow. But when you look out at just eyeball level, you're going to see a green wall with a little bit of specks of lights in between, and it could be a perfect compromise, if there is such a thing.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments about lighting? Yeah, come on. Then we're going to try to move on to traffic.
Nancy Clausen, I'm at 31 Spruce Street, which is on the corner of Hemlock and Spruce. I only learned about this project recently with a letter. If there were years and years of meetings, I would have been very happy to know about them and attend. I moved into this neighborhood, and I love being next to the middle school with the marching band and the kids playing and all of this stuff. I love being part of the neighborhood in that way. When I looked at the lights out on the field trip, I just went home feeling sick to my stomach, because I want to be next to a school, not something that looks like Fenway Park. And I think the glow and the huge lights that are, I'm across the street, but my across the street neighbors, their kids' bedrooms are a few feet from these playing fields. And I think the point just made about how much they need these fields, because they're taking other fields out, means that it's going to be late and all the time. If you're putting your baby to bed a few feet away from this, even if there are trees, this is not the neighborhood I moved into. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Susan Fosher on 50 Parker Street. I just want to kind of, in complete agreement with what Kim and Joe said, it's going to have a tremendous impact on our community, on our little neighborhood. And I know you're going to go to traffic, but I have to leave very shortly. The other day, just for the sake of it, there was a father-daughter dance in the middle school. Well, we had cars parked in front of our house on Parker Street. Now, you're going to have the utilization of these fields for soccer, for football, for all variety of different fields going at once. The parking is going to be atrocious. And this was a father-daughter dance. So I'm in complete agreement with my neighbors. I support our concerns. I don't know what's going to be done. I have a funny feeling what's going to be done, but I just want to make it public that the lights are definitely going to have an impact on our life, and the traffic is going to have an impact on our life. And if we have to sell, we'll sell.
Thank you.
But the parking, because maybe she hadn't been into some of the meetings, but
No.
I've been at
So-
meetings.
So, okay, well, again, I mean, we've talked about parking. I think, again, that's something that we have very little control of in terms of a site plan, because all we can really talk about is the parking lots and traffic, parking on Parker Street.
it's an enforcement issue.
Right. And again, I know there was an officer here earlier. I know, I think I've spoken about this with members of the Board of Selectmen, and we've definitely encouraged, I know there are internal discussions about that. And, so, to be determined on that, but again, that's not going to really be part of our decision one way or the other about parking outside of the actual site. We will talk about now traffic and parking on the site, which is something we do have jurisdiction over.
Sure. So if you go to the next slide, there's some, we've got, this was in response to concerns by the school administration about how access would be provided to the schools during construction.
Well, for those of us that weren't privy to those, can you kind of summarize what their concerns were? I mean, I know we had concerned about queuing and about pickup and drop off. I assume it's similar concerns?
Yeah.
Yes, if you want to just, if you could zoom out a little bit more.
This is specific to the construction time
Yeah.
period.
Okay.
Yes.
So right now, okay, for everyone, so we're talking about construction and traffic. We're not talking about the general traffic flow.
We covered that at the last meeting, and we resolved, to the best of our ability as a project, traffic flow issues.
Okay.
And parking and capacity. We've previously addressed that and resolved that.
Okay, and the school did not raise issues as to the 5 years from now.
That's
Can
right.
everyone just quiet down just a little bit? The 5 years from now, the traffic and things like that, how things will
That's
flow once the site is fully built and running.
That's right.
Okay, but there were some concerns about how traffic would flow during construction.
That's correct.
Okay, so tell us what was discussed
Can
and
we just pause for a
Yeah.
minute, because someone's trying to...
I'm sorry, I didn't know you were done
with lighting?
with the lighting, and I meant to come up to the
All
front
right.
of it.
Thank you. Yeah.
There was a suggestion, is Lori, you
Can
made
you
the suggestion?
Introduce yourself?
Joan Kulash from Bradstreet Road. You'd made the suggestion about visiting a site that actually showed what these gentlemen were talking about. And I'd love to be able to have such, I think that that's an excellent idea. I think that it could allay people's concerns near a neighborhood. And to be able to talk to some of the neighbors. I mean, they may be saying everything's fine. And I think that would make everybody feel a lot better. As far as conditions are concerned, it seems as though one of the things that you can do is either A, say no lighting, which looks like that's not going to happen.
We could say that.
But you could.
Yes.
Or you could make some kind of a compromise that was also brought up that I'd love for you to at least think about, and that is no lighting at the field that's abutting the neighborhoods. And perhaps not even turf there as well. And I know we're not talking about turf, so I won't bring that up. But I think that's something that's very important to be thinking about. And that is a compromise that really is going to have a dramatic effect. Because it seems as though what Kim was reading about the purview of the planning board is to be thinking about how it's going to be impacting the abutters. And that's what we're here for today. And I do believe that the abutters are, for the most part, wanting a recreational complex, but they want something that is going to be able to live in harmony with the neighborhood there. And I'd love for you to be thinking about those two things. One, the field trip, and to be thinking about it very seriously so we can all go and feel better. And B, having that excellent compromise, which I think would fill everybody's needs. So just to think about that as well.
Thank you.
So one issue on the not lighting the softball field, we've got a Title IX issue with that. The equality, softball is primarily a women's girl sport. And as soon as we don't light the softball field, we now run the risk of lighting the boys' sports, but not lighting the girls' sports. And Rick and others, including ourselves, have talked in the past about how how precise the alignment and layout of the fields are and how everything needs to be exactly where it is. We can't just swap the big field and put it closer to the neighborhood. That would cause even more light spillage. And from a geometry standpoint, just doesn't work because the property is not wide enough for that. So the capacity or the ability of the fields to do what the town is looking for it to do is cut in half if we flip the fields around to get the girls' field lit in the middle of the field and put the boys' field or the bigger field closer to the neighborhood. So from a utilization standpoint, it doesn't work. And as soon as we don't light the girls' field, I think the town has a Title IX issue. And, you know, that's been something that's been rigorously defended for a long time on across a lot of different levels. So it's not that easy to just say, don't light
No,
the softball.
but it's, I know that's certainly not the intent of the person who is
I
suggesting it.
understand, but it has a ripple effect that could be tricky.
Right, and the thing we have to think about is we're weighing two different goals, right? One goal of the neighborhood is, yeah, we'd love a field, but don't really impact us so much. And then there's a goal of people from throughout the town that don't live there, of being able to use it as much as possible. So
I think part of
It's
the
a
thing,
struggle.
one of the things that I struggle with is the definition of impact, because, you know, in some ways, what's being presented is an all or nothing kind of discussion. We hate the lights, and this is just unacceptable. Well, there is a middle ground, and the middle ground is aggressive screening that can satisfy the direct view sightlines of the lights. And we've already gone and bent over backwards with the light fixtures to provide that dark cutoff line. So we've provided the two things that can actually get this to work. It's
Okay.
the all or nothing piece
So
of the discussion.
let's go
that's
back to the
hard for us.
traffic. Let's go
Well,
back.
I think we have one more question.
1 minute.
It's gotta be
You
quick,
don't
yeah.
have to call it a girls' softball field.
Well, it is, that's what it is.
It's not.
That's what it is.
The boys use it for gym class daily during school hours.
I know.
You can call it a boys' men's
all
softball,
right, let
but as
me-
long as it's
Okay.
no Title IX issue.
No, you can't
I've
do
been there
that. You-
35 years, I've watched what's played there. You don't have to call it a
think-
girls' softball.
I think the point is that he was making is the impact that if there's an
You can't
adverse
even,
impact.
you can't get cute like that and call it something else. The reality is.
Don't call it anything.
Let's move on.
Call it a toaster if you want,
Let's
you're
move
still
on.
gonna have a Title IX issue, because it's a softball field, and softball is a girls' sport. So boys, in fact, boys will still be playing on that diamond, because it's a Little League-sized diamond. That doesn't mean it's not a girls' softball
So
field.
let's continue with the traffic discussion.
Okay.
All right, so we're talking about construction, and there were concerns raised by the school.
Right.
What were those concerns? Guys, we need to be able to hear this and move on to this, okay? What were the concerns and how have they been addressed?
If you could just shrink that image just a little bit more. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, a little bit bigger, yeah, right there, okay. And then could you put the mouse on the, because it's right over that little plus sign is,
It takes it a minute to.
okay, it'll disappear in a minute. All right, the point I'm trying to show here is that at the bottom of this slide is Route 125, thank you. We're creating a separate construction-only entrance. And that's what you see in the center of the graphic with that kind of a dogleg left line. That's the construction-only entrance. So the construction vehicles will not be competing with school access in any way, except that they will use 125 to get to the site, just like anybody else is going to use 125 to get there. They will cross over. There's an intersection that we're creating. They will cross over the middle school road, but that will be done with flagmen to make sure that they are safely crossing, and to the extent that there's traffic headed towards either leaving or heading towards the schools, the flagman will stop. It'll be a 10-second interruption, and then every life goes on. So that's the entrance in and out for all construction activity and all employees. So nobody gets to use this unless school is out. When school is out, then they could also come in the middle school area, but that's only when school is out.
So you're proposing signs on 125?
We will have signage to that effect,
And that would require a Mass DOT permit as well?
whatever it takes.
And were there going to be hours during the day, during the school year, that there would not be construction?
Hours during, no, there'll be construction during the school
And
year.
entrances, so I guess the question is, when all the cars are coming in for pickup and stuff like that, where are vehicles going? Are they gonna be coming in at that point?
Well, so the nature of construction is that it's kind of a pulse thing. It's not a constant flow like it is for pickup and drop-off for the school. So you'll have some activity that will be 2 or 3 trucks, and then there'll be nothing. There'll be 1 truck, there'll be a pickup truck, and there'll be nothing. So intermittent and sporadic. It's never a constant flow unless they're moving a lot of material all at once, and if that's the case, we'll require that they schedule that in advance.
Are
So,
there any restrictions on the time that the construction vehicles can come or go?
no. As soon as we put those kind of restrictions on it, the price of the job goes up because it takes something that's a constant and an easy thing to predict, and it becomes unpredictable. And now the contractor is saying, well, I don't know when I'm going to have a need, but I've got a restriction, so my price goes up. So we really can't do that sort of thing. It's going to create problems for the town money financially.
Typically, our decisions do indicate hours of construction Monday through Friday and also Saturdays.
Well, so, all right, so I guess I misheard your question. So what did you got to speak up here. 6:30 to what?
Right now, we had 6:30 to 6 PM, and that's not necessarily normal, but at least the timeframe where normal construction happens. Typically, it's 7 to 3:30, but particularly if we're wanting trucks to get in onto construction, before the school traffic, the people who are using the site, 6:30 is helpful in that. If not, they're going to compete with the workers are going to compete with the school traffic.
Right.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, 6:30 then?
You answered my question. I asked a different question.
Okay.
So just keep in mind that in order to get the employees to the site before that pickup, you typically start construction period at 7, they're requesting 6:30 to start.
Right,
We
which is
typically-
when school's starting, and when the teachers.
7 o'clock is the window of drop-off time.
Right, so we
So
do
that will
want,
get the employees there ahead of that.
And that's what you want, is the employees there ahead of time, so that they can do work, and we'll even ask them to do work that doesn't require a lot of back and forth. I just don't want to require it, because then I'm dictating their means and methods, and that's when the cost goes up.
okay, I do have some concerns about traffic coming in at the same time, pick up and drop off.
Well, and that's why I took the time to explain how the flagman works.
Yeah,
So what we've seen is that the pickup and drop-off activity here is pretty thick. Nobody's moving in an express lane fashion to get pickup and drop-off.
so I'm sorry, we say flagman every day?
Whenever is needed. There'll be somebody on the site, an
Seems like that might be-
an employee of the contractor who's
Okay.
qualified to be able to do this. When there's a line of cars, he goes out with a flag, just like a policeman would. Please stop when it's convenient, not because he's going to back up traffic. This is not meant to be a steady stream. This is, can I just break the chain and go across? And in that kind of way, it has zero impact on the use of the street.
I do want to point out, in terms of, just a comment from Greg Gilliam, I guess there are 2 hours of critical hours were between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and maybe like 1:45 and 3:45. So that's something you may want to address in terms of dealing with those.
Did the school have concern about, did they have suggestions or concerns about those time periods?
It was primarily a concern, so you want to discuss how best to address this. Now, he's mentioned flagmen during which hours?
So I think
Anytime.
possibly there were discussions since that was sent, right? So Jim Milley is here from the school department.
Hi.
Hi, Jim Mealy, Assistant Superintendent, School Department. So we did have a meeting, and Monica is right that Superintendent Gilligan had expressed his desire that, if possible, there were windows when there was not going to be any construction traffic. And it came about because, being ultra-sensitive to what happened when we were opening up the Ann Bradstreet Early Childhood Center, we had construction vehicles mixing in with our drop-off and pickup traffic. And it was very disconcerting to everyone. So understanding that it could drive up the cost of the project, we asked if it's possible to have those windows in the morning and in the afternoon when we're doing pickup and drop-off, when there wouldn't be, or if there were going to be the needs for vehicles to come on, that we would be notified. He's right, it's not difficult, especially when we're only talking about one point of entry. If you're coming in from 125, we do it all the time right now in the parking lot. We'll stop the line of traffic to let staff in or out of the parking lot. And it's one-way traffic. It's very easy to make that change. But I think we want to make sure that the communication is much better than it had been for the site work project that we were doing for the Early Childhood Center.
So-
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you said mixing in, we weren't part of the other project, but if in our case, our vehicles are not driving in parallel with the same school traffic, we're crossing it. Is that what happened before?
Correct, that's what I'm saying. That's why we're ultra-sensitive right now
We won't
about
be-
this.
We won't be doing that, and I can understand the concern. If there's a dump truck after a minivan and then an excavator, right? That creates confusion for everybody, construction vehicles and the parents. That's a bad scene. We're proposing just the opposite.
So what I
We have a
need.
separate entrance, and we're going to cross and be
So what
done.
I need is for you guys to get on the same page on that, because I really defer to the schools
Yeah.
on that. So if we can all get on the same page, and if we don't want a condition about that, fine. If we do want a condition that it's not gonna be certain times, then everyone needs to get on the same
Yeah,
page
I
on that,
mean-
because I think it go either way.
Our vehicles, we're not proposing that our vehicles go in tandem or in parallel. with
You're saying they're
any-
gonna come in a separate entrance, and
Separate
when they come in,
entrance.
someone say, hey, everyone stop,
Yeah,
come
right.
across. Got it, I just
Yeah.
need to know.
And we can do that. We're sensitive to the cost of the project as well, but obviously, safety, we just need some assurances,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
we can work that out.
All right,
So,
so we'll
as
work
far
that
as
out.
insurances go, that gets written into our contract for the contractor.
Okay.
And it becomes a legal document that can be enforced, and he can pay penalties for that. So that's an easy one to enforce.
Okay. All right. All right, anyone want to talk about construction and traffic? Okay. Next,
That's it.
is that it?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain the pathway for the
Oh,
walkers?
so right, I'm sorry, at the top of the page, we're
Okay.
creating a bituminous walkway for students to be able to walk. This will be protected by a Jersey barrier and a fence and a screen. So physical barrier to prevent any construction activity from even remotely coming in contact with the walkway. There'll be a physical space so that even if a construction vehicle were to bump the barrier, it would not affect the walkway because it'd be far enough away from the walkway. There'll be a fence on top of that, and then there'll be a wind screen so that debris, dust doesn't really go through it. And so that pedestrian walkway will be protected at all times during the project, until, of course, it's time to actually build that area, at which point we'll provide access a different way. We're also protecting with the same buffer and fencing, the Atkinson Playground, right? And then we're purposely going to be working on the parking lot early in the process, up in the top corner of the page right now, so that also gets put online early in the project, and so that the parking lot can be utilized by the school. And then you see the dotted lines showing the fence and the barriers around it to protect it from construction.
So previously, the staging and construction park area was going to be over near that parking lot.
That's
That's
right.
been moved to the middle of the field as well,
Right.
to allow for the parking for the faculty.
Right. And so the construction staging area is in the middle of the project site, as far away from other uses as you can be. So we've created a good compromise there.
And the construction parking area is that black highlighted
Right.
rectangle
red-
at the end of the
red one.
construction area.
Okay.
So that's everything here on this slide.
Sir, or ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer Murphy, 50 Brad Street Road. If I could request that you have some type of water truck available during construction. I don't necessarily trust the screening you mentioned while school's in session. Dust doesn't stay, below 5 feet, so that would be appreciated.
Okay, can we make a potential note of that or something for dust?
That's
I
a-
mean,
that's-
usually we put in conditions about dust
That's
control.
that's a part of our spec already.
Okay.
So water and dust control is part and parcel of how this gets done.
So we, not necessarily exactly a water truck, but there will be something that we put in as a condition or part of the contract about dust.
That's right, that's right.
We typically require a top over it if the mound's going to stay over.
That's right. There's a whole series of elements that go into the dust control program.
And just for everyone, either here or at home, there, as part of any project this size in a municipality, there will be a project manager who will oversee the day-to-day.
That's right.
People will have access to phone numbers and things like people to call if these things, issues do arise as projects go
Yeah,
on.
This person, you'll be able to pick him or her out easily, go up and talk to them and say, this is a problem right now, come see it. And that person's job is to resolve it on the spot, so.
Okay. Anyone else?
Was that it for the construction traffic?
I think so. So if there's something else you want to
Yeah,
come
I
up and
just
say.
wanted to make one quick comment.
Sure.
My name is Steve Kennedy, my wife Emily. We're 135 Beacon Hill Boulevard, so we're direct abutters. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the fields, the surfaces being proposed. I know a question was brought up at the last meeting about them, and that I've kind of dove into that because that really piqued my interest about the any health effects of the synthetic fields. First of all, I know that's been really touted as these are maintenance-free fields. That's not true at all. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into synthetic fields, including the spraying of chemicals, pesticides, to keep any weeds from growing up through them, and then cleaning solutions as well, antimicrobials. So any of the maintenance-free, that's definitely not true. And then they only have 8 to 10 year lifespans, which they have to be replaced. And because of the toxicity levels of them, most incinerators and landfills will not take them. So that's a very high cost to dispose of them. With that toxicity, then that obviously leads to another path. So currently, the EPA and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry both have studies published showing that polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons increase cancer rates as well as chances of birth defects. Those are currently published studies. And then additionally, the EPA, CDC, again, the Agency for Toxic Substances, have launched a study to determine the effects of synthetic fields in general, not just this one compound, the PAHs. So I know it was brought up at the last meeting. I didn't see anything here, so I just wanted that to be maybe thrown on the record that is a concern of direct abutters with children, and the birth defect thing was kind of a eye opener as well. So.
Can I put a question to the board here? And I just refresh my memory. Did we raise at the last meeting that the question of potential health effects of synthetic fields, that's something we might refer to the Board of Health and ask for their advice
We
on?
did, and they said that as long as it met certain lead level.
They gave us the standard,
Yeah, they gave us a standard that as long as it met that they were comfortable. So we did do that.
That's right.
We had no problem incorporating their comment.
Right, and so that was going to be part of the specs. So obviously, we don't actually have the exact type that we're going to use. That'll all be.
Yeah, I didn't mention the lead levels. The PAHs are already proven cancer and birth defects. So that's my lead. That's kind of a.
My recollection is that when they came back, it was very specific for the lead, but does that beg the question of if there are other health-related concerns? That's what the question is here.
Right.
Is there-
My assumption from what they stated was that they did not have additional concerns, but.
Would it be too much to go back and to the Board of Health and say, thank you for the lead, are there any other non-lead health concerns? I mean, they're the subject matter experts, and I think it's a way to be responsive to the questions.
Sure.
One of the things that we mentioned in a previous discussion in this forum about this topic was that the town has already gone through this process with the high school field. And so we're not the first ones bringing the artificial turf.
Agree, but the high school doesn't have the houses in that close proximity. And these PAHs are released from the rubber plastic compounds.
You didn't let me finish. What I'm trying to say is that the town has already, as far as I know, vetted the entire toxicity issue because they did this with the high school field. just because it's the high school field doesn't mean it's less or more safe than
So-
this field.
You know, that was part of our earlier discussion, and I think we actually put the question to the former town manager, and
Right,
I thought his response was helpful, but also carefully worded
right.
to say that there was no data that had arisen, or
That's right.
words to that effect. And to me, I take your point that we already have the field there. I don't know that at the time that was done, if the Board of Health had weighed in. I just don't know. And so my only point here is to be responsive to these questions. We have subject matter experts. They're on the Board of Health. We've asked one question. We got a pretty specific response related to lead. I found that, now that you've reminded me, thank you, very helpful. But I would like to expand the question back to them. Are there any other non-lead related health concerns? And let's let them weigh in on it.
Okay. So can we just,
Their response.
could we just send a letter to the Board of Health asking, just if they have any other, as Peter said, they've taught us about lead, do they have any other health-related concerns to synthetic turf that we would potentially incorporate into a condition?
Are there specific compounds that you would like Brian to look into? Because his
Other-
focus was lead,
Yeah.
however.
I think it's everything. I mean, they should understand better than us what
Yeah, I
the
can't-
relevant regulatory regime is related to this stuff and what
It
set of
was
standards would be
interesting. They gave us
applicable.
a standard for lead, which was very helpful, but are there other standards? And I understand why you're asking, but that's up to them.
Yeah.
We can't specify which compounds to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, and then we'll have some thorough subject matter input.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question.
Quickly, I handed out handout the night that our meeting was continued, and it was in reference to all of that, and it had references to studies. I was wondering if the Board of Health commented on any of that.
That was handed to him and.
I handed it to everyone.
Right, and the next day, I delivered it to the Board of Health, who reviewed it, but he still didn't have any other concerns. He maintained his first review was sufficient. However, I can go back,
So to
have a
clarify,
look
that
at.
was the health director.
That-
not the Board
exactly.
of Health, the health director.
Because it was, that article that I distributed had many other references that article used in their findings for Maryland.
And
So we'll-
and
we'll-
my
yeah.
question was specific, if it's possible for us to refer this to the Board of Health, certainly via the health director, but my request was that it go to the full board.
And just to be clear, I mean, everything that we're talking about in terms of synthetic fields are approved or allowed by the state and federal government. I mean, there's nothing
That's
that's,
correct.
Yeah.
We're not suggesting something that hasn't already been vetted by EPA and the state DEP. And there's a body of evidence that shows.
And I don't think we're suggesting otherwise, it's just, we have a group of health experts in town.
Sure.
We're just asking them to give us their validation.
Sure.
But that'll go to the board via the director, not just the director?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'll-
great, thanks.
I will specifically
If that's okay.
refer
Yeah,
that there.
Thank you.
It's likely the Board of Health does not meet until, I believe, the last Thursday of the month.
okay. And whenever we can get input back would be great.
So are we looking at continuation, or is there a chance that you can close the hearing and get the Board of Health input?
Well, I don't think we were going to close the hearing tonight anyway, right?
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure.
No, I think we're going to have multiple hearings, just because there might be people that aren't here tonight that want to have input. There might be other questions. I don't, so I don't think we plan to
This
close.
hearing's been open for several meetings.
Right.
Right.
I wasn't sure when we were.
I thought possibly if the rest of the information was
Right.
presented, that next meeting was a possible decision. But
Okay.
this, unless the Board of Health calls a meeting to
So-
discuss this, then that puts it out of that window.
Okay, so we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
They may have an opportunity to evaluate it via email or so, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's up to them.
Okay.
Can I ask, because the fire department will, once they spec out the materials, they're going to be evaluating it after the fact to make sure that it's compliant with being non-flammable, things of that nature. Would it be possible to condition that the Board of Health review the materials and then provide back a comment? Because I don't know at what point you're going to know exactly what
Well,
materials
So
will be.
here's well, yes, so I mean, I think we can, two things. One, I think we can ask the question, put it to them, let them talk about the meeting. We could potentially vote on it, having a condition that we get some sort of approval or review by them. We can also, I think if they were to review it after the fact and there was an issue, I think we would be well within our rights to reopen and discuss it again as a change in conditions, so. I think we have a lot of options there. So, okay, so then we may look to close it next time. We'll see what we can get.
I was actually going to bring up what you had just said, to take a look at the materials that are in the artificial turf. The flame retardant is a big concern now as far as that being a carcinogen as well. And I don't know if they were aware of the EPA study, which is something that I think that we'd like to have a thorough review of and ask them, I know you can't dictate, ask them if they could bring in some experts, subject matter experts that can be talking about this. I don't know, you folks are probably aware of the Martha Vineyard incident that just happened, where there was a long-term debate about whether to put the artificial turf down. It was a 3-year debate, and people were very concerned about the turf. And they ultimately came up with a compromise. And the compromise was that one of the fields would be turf, artificial turf rather, and the other fields were going to be grass. So again, I love this whole idea of compromise, and hopefully working in harmony with the community and the community's concerns. But I think that we really need to have a real study, and bring in subject matter experts. I realize that that's going to take a little bit of extra time, but in the interest of making sure that we're doing the right thing for the community, the health and safety of the community, and in particular the abutters, I think that's worth the time. So,
thank you.
And if I could, just to make sure we stay within the realm of site plan approval. These are great topics to discuss, but those are matters that the town, I think, decided 2 years ago, that this is the direction they needed to go in from a project standpoint. And so we're really not here offering to take turf off the table. The project has turf in it, and that's the way it is. It can be discussed and should be, but we're here for site plan approval on a site that meets the requirements of the bylaw, so.
Point taken.
It's a tricky,
Yep.
sticky,
Thanks.
so.
Okay. Anything else? Gene, so where do we go from here? Where can we go from here? Can we have a draft decision? Let's make more specific questions. Can we have a draft decision for next meeting? And is there any more information that we necessarily need to make a decision? The questions that haven't been answered. Now, the health one, we may not have our answers, I know that. But other than that, is there outstanding questions in your mind? Stormwater, anything?
The stormwater, the peer review has been completed. There are a couple items left to the discretion of the board, so we would include those as conditions in the decision.
Okay.
We talked about different light options for the pedestrian. Do you want any of those pursued? Do you want to leave them at the 25? Do you want to pursue bollards lights, lowering the height of the light? How do you want to
Screening.
And do you need decisions on that before
Well, we
you
can
draft a
put-
decision, or can you put
We put a placeholder in for it.
placeholder?
We'll, again, we can condition on additional screening. Almost all the site plan reviews leaves it with, should it not be sufficient at the time of construction, then the planning director always has the ability to add additional screening. So I would leave that standard condition.
So then what I would ask is that if we could try to have a draft decision, and any of these kind of significant issues that have been raised, leave a placeholder. We'll discuss at the next meeting, and if we're able to take a vote. So, the height of the lights, placement of the lights.
Lit softball field
Lit-
versus not lit softball field,
Correct.
grass versus turf, any of that type
Screening.
of.
Screening, pedestrian lights, heights, numbers, the construction, traffic, and when those are, and if we can kind of leave broad placeholders for those. And then any of the rest, or, our general mitigation, anything, stormwater, anything you can really pin down, put in, and we'll try to vote on that next time. So we,
Have you provided construction detail for the entrance, riprap, wash station, any of the detail?
We do have a construction entrance detail.
Okay. Can you
and
provide any of that?
any police, fire input, DPW input, any school input, more than we could have all of that. And to the extent we can have it a few days before, so people can look at it and make comments,
Of course.
that would be great. Okay, all right, so continued until
The 19th of
March 19th. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, so the Conservation Commission
Oh, yeah.
intends to hear this again on the 13th, right?
Yes, they don't, the Conservation Commission at the last meeting, they didn't have any more pressure comments. The only reason they continued was because you needed to, they liked it that you continued, that you figured this first. So I'll have to talk to Rick, but we'll probably continue.
Good questions.
Okay.
Good questions, good comments, very constructive.
Yeah. Let's worry about how much we can do.
Is that the type?
I am.
Because it's outside of our authority. Town meeting. Town meeting approved it. We have to do our job, like Bill Belichick said. Bill Belichick, that guy. Do your job. Yeah. Oh, Robert Kraft, that's what. Okay.
I'm gonna be an Eagles fan.
And Phillies.
Saying so.
Oh, okay. 4 High Street? Is there anything else? Is that it?
Yes.
4 High Street, RCG West Mill, NA LLC.
Said my team coming in.
Told me to put you guys last so you could bill more.
I know, I feel like we're always last.
Not always. Last time I think I tried to do it first.
All right. We good, Phil? Are we good?
So this is so 4 High Street, RCG West Mill. Now this is a public meeting, correct? Okay, so that means that we're having it in public and talking about it, but it's not necessarily the same as a public hearing where everyone can come up and just say whatever they want. It will be pretty flexible in allowing people to comment and have questions, but it's not, you don't have the same rights as a public hearing where part of the record and you can just get up and, you're a little more limited, okay? So, with that being said, tell us what we're here for.
For the record, my name is Tanya Hartford. I'm with RCG, RCG West Mill NA LLC. We are here for, as you said, a preliminary subdivision application for a proposed 3-lot subdivision at the West Mill. The roadway, as you can see, will separate the 3 lots. It's already existing as a roadway that connects to the Sutton Pond condominiums. So that will be improved, and it will be designated as a private way. And it'll provide access to, open up access to Lot 2, which is that lot in the back. Lot 1 will be the historic mill area. Lot 2 will be an area for future development. We do have that lot under agreement with Avalon Bay, and they will be coming in the next month or so, sooner or later, to come talk with you about their development proposal. And Lot 3 will be will continue to be a parking area that will be used as a shared parking area between the development that's going to happen in Lot 2 and our development. We do not have that as part of our special permit for parking, but we see that as a good shared access point and parking lot. So that's sort of the extent of it. I'm going to turn it over to Phil and John to go through our waiver request that we have proposed, and Phil will go through sort of the technical aspects of our plan.
Could you just, I appreciate the picture being zoomed. Could you zoom that picture just a little bit more? Oh, very helpful. Now, tell me again, which ones are 1, 2, and 3?
Lot 1 is the historic mill area, so which was the subject of our special permit application that we
So
were
my
in here.
lower left?
Yeah, where all the mills are,
Okay.
the current development.
Oh, great.
Actually, if you go to the next, there you go.
Great. Good,
And actually,
thank
if you go down one more,
Good
you
to
can
go.
actually see the building.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So lot 1, you can see there
yep.
is our current property. And that lot line actually is where our phase 1 definitive master plan special permit area is, that you heard at the last meeting. Lot 3, as you can see, is the front area. That is where we currently have parking. And then lot 2 is where what we call the ball fields parcel. So that's the area that has some of the existing parking lot and then the current ball fields that are out there, the undeveloped area.
I take it you're doing this to carve off Lot 2 to separate it from the rest of the property because it's going to be a different ownership.
That's right.
Okay.
And we wanted
Are
to,
you going to actually build a real road?
That's one of the questions.
that's one of the questions. I mean, the roadway will be enhanced. It won't be a public way, but we do have an obligation to Sutton Pond condominiums to have access, to have an easement area.
Yeah.
Right now, you can kind of see in there, there's a funny easement, you can see the easement area that kind of cuts through lot 1. That's actually the old easement area. There was a new easement that was done in the 90s that sort of followed this road, but a plan was never filed with the registry. So once this is approved and developed, then we would file that plan to show the access to the Sutton Pond condominiums.
So does this mean that for Lot 2, we'll get to deal with Avalon Bay rather than you guys?
Yes. Get a different face. So we're not going to get into the details of that plan. I think that this particular preliminary subdivision plan is really to show the lotting and to show the road. I think that as we get in, as that plan is developed, they'll come to you and you talk through sort of how that plan will work.
And just John Smolak, attorney for RCG. I won't elaborate further than what Tanya had indicated, other than the fact that the proposed roadway is about 376 feet in length. And it's a bit of an unusual roadway, but not unique to the town, because in the past, historically, the town, this board has granted certain waivers to roadways so that the roadways don't have to be built out to design specs. The roadway is essentially within an existing parking area for the most part. And what we'd like to do is float some ideas by you in terms of waivers that we may be looking for. And as Tanya had indicated, the easement that runs to Sutton Mill, the Sutton Mill condominiums was originally there from the early 70s. And then when, and John, you probably are aware, when Marty Spaggett purchased Davis and Ferber back in the early 90s, he entered into a new agreement with the Sutton Mill condominium in terms of a replacement easement. And so that was at a time when I think that there was a consideration of putting a Kmart back there at that time, back in the early 90s. So glad that never happened.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't want to belabor the discussion.
Are you doing a preliminary subdivision just to use that as the forum for some of these comments about the roadway? I mean, because you could have gone right to a definitive if you wanted to.
Right, well, it's a mixed use, so I think we needed to go through this first preliminary subdivision step. So, but I guess more importantly, we wanted to try to get some feedback in terms of some of the requested waivers, some of which you've already mentioned in terms of the roadway, in terms of what we're looking for. I mean, and Phil and I could discuss those if you want to, but I think a couple of the principal waivers we've requested are the elimination of a cul-de-sac, because we don't think it's really necessary for this roadway. because it leads to an existing pathway,
Are you saying eliminating a current cul-de-sac or just not having to have a cul-de-sac?
not having to have a cul-de-sac for the proposed new roadway. And we've had discussions, or Phil has, with the fire department, and from what I understand, I won't speak for the fire department or for Phil, other than the fact that they deemed that there was sufficient access for the existing parking area, so there wouldn't be a need for a separate turnaround. And so if we wanted to go through the waivers, we could. Phil, if
Yeah,
you
go
had
ahead.
any other thoughts. I mean, that was one of the major waiver requests that we'd proceed with as part of the definitive. And we've also suggested a reduction in the width of the right-of-way from 60 to 50 feet, but maintaining pavement width of either 26 or 30 feet. We'd like to go down to 26 feet. So that's another request that we would be looking for down the road. And in terms of one of the other waivers, there's a requirement for an environmental and community impact analysis or assessment. It's required for subdivisions. We would be looking for a waiver from that, simply because of the fact that when Phase 2 comes in, you'll have that as part of site plan review. So we think it would probably be duplicative of that assessment, which is called the fiscal and community impact analysis under site plan review. So,
Is there, I mean, just subdividing, obviously not gonna have that much impact. Would we, I guess, as long as, to me on that one, as long as we have lot 2, right? If when that project is proposed, we have enough hooks, then it seems like we're okay. So that's the issue. So just gotta tell us what we'll be able to do when, well, I just have to figure out what we'll be able to do when lot 2 comes to us.
And roughly what time frame will they be coming forward?
You should probably in the next month or so, they'll come informally, and then they'll make a filing in the next, after that. I think that right now they just started conversations with the town,
Is it a mix or is it all housing?
residential, all apartments. Similar to what's in the master plan.
I do want to make sure that we mention just the other waivers that are requested, which were street numbers. Those would be assigned typically during the definitive approval. The elimination of most of the curbing would be waived to provide granite edging on the north side of the road, just adjacent to lots 2 and 3. A waiver of trees and plantings, as this preliminary subdivision plan doesn't call for any street trees. Waiver of street signs, street lighting, and certain construction specifications.
So are those all being asked to be waived on the preliminary, or are we talking about waiving those when we get to the definitive?
You have them listed under the preliminary as of right now.
well, we listed them, all except for one require waiver action as part of the definitive process. And so, for example, street trees, the placement of lighting, we think is probably more appropriate as part of site plan review, as part of the Phase 2 that you'll see. I mean, again, there's a length of 300 feet of roadway, and it's all in an existing paved parking area where there is existing lighting. And so we think that as part of that, the Phase 2, that's something that would be fleshed out a little bit more rather than.
So what are you asking us to do? What are we being asked to do today?
Okay, so your approval of the preliminary subdivision, you have basically 2 points to look at, and that would be under 4.5 of section 255. So you're going to be looking to see if this is a proper submission. So that would be if all the materials, application materials were turned in, it went through distribution to the various departments, which I can go through, their comments as well. And then after that, you just, within 45 of the days of their submission, you decide if you basically approve their preliminary or you disapprove. So it's
So has it been, what's been done in terms of, everything's been submitted, I take it?
Yes, everything's been submitted. It's been distributed to the various departments who all provided just comment. So fire department was looking for a sweat pass analysis, and they provided their fire truck specifications. Jennifer Hughes of conservation was curious if this met the 75% upland developable area. Health department had no concerns. The DPW actually just provided actually comment right before the meeting, so apologize you didn't get all of those. But they did point out that there's a 12-inch water main within the 25-foot access easement, which provides water service to Sutton Pond condominiums, and that was just for your information. They also stated that there's a 20-foot wide sewer easement containing a portion of the town's 24-inch east side trunk sewer, and again, that was all informational. And then they said, again, that's a major line that leads to the town's sewage to GLSD. They did make a recommendation that the site of the driveway be moved to better align with the intersection by shifting the driveway. They just wanted to see if we can make it a safer, more controlled alignment with the existing intersection on Prescott Street. Building required, asked for CBA calculations, but that'll be, and that you added to your plan. The school department just commented on Lot 2. And of course, their position was that 1 and 2 bedroom units at market rate don't greatly impact the school system, but 3 bedroom units and low income housing do, but you would address that. The police department said he has no concerns with the preliminary plans, and of course would like input on the landscape and accessibility for police cars related to service. So it went through all those departments.
On the school one, though, we don't have a project in front of us yet.
Right.
Correct?
No, I mean, this is a preliminary subdivision,
Right.
it's just creating the lot, I mean, at this point.
Right, you don't have the specifications actually what would be potentially placed on number 2.
Okay. All right, anything else from you guys? Sarah?
No, I think the only question that we had in terms of, and I know the hour's late, but I guess we're trying to get some feedback in terms of the roadway. Again, we're citing a roadway that's in an existing parking area. We think that the
Well, yeah, I mean, my thinking, you mentioned 50 versus 60, but it's, our rules and regulations, there's the right of way's 50 feet, not 60.
well, for commercial,
Is
you
it?
have residential commercial at 60 for local street. Yeah, for commercial at 60 feet, yeah.
Oh, okay. Is that in the rules and regulations?
Yeah, just for a local street, for
Okay.
local.
Yeah, I mean, I think, do you know, once you get off the edge where hypothetically, where you would have had to put the cul-de-sac if we forced you to do it, what are the easement rights out there? Because, I mean, I, like many other people, just drive right through there, all the way through there. I guess maybe I'm not supposed to, but I do anyway. But I mean, there's nothing blocking you, and there's no signage or anything like that precluding you from doing it.
Yeah, the easement rights, what they do, the easement was to enable Sutton Pond condominium to have vehicular access out to High Street. And basically, the signage is prohibited in that area. Parking within that right-of-way or easement is prohibited. It was meant to be as an additional accommodation to the Sutton Pond condominium. And so...
Right, but on the other side, sort of what the easement rights are going out the other way? Because, I mean, you can make the argument that, you wouldn't put a cul-de-sac there because people can get out the other way and you don't want to block it.
Yeah, you can go this way, you can't go, you can come from town to the Sutton Pond, but it's a one-way.
Oh, it's a one-way, okay.
Okay. And so the road is all within the property though, right? Okay.
It's the existing drive.
Right. Doesn't really seem like a big deal. Okay. Is there anyone that has any particular comments? Again, so this is a preliminary subdivision of how they're proposing to divide the lots. Obviously, there will be more to come in separate issues, but if anyone has any questions or comments, might as well take them. We're all here still. Hi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Steven Saraceno. Thank you for taking me this evening. I actually live at 102 High Street. I know this area quite well because I'm a builder and a developer myself, and I actually developed that parcel. So I understand that there was a meeting that might have happened beforehand with regards to this project, so excuse me if I ask some questions on things that might have already been answered. But from my perspective, if I was to go out and purchase a raw piece of land, or I own the land and I wanted to develop it, and I had a preliminary subdivision, I would have to have a roadway that would meet requirements, or I would be asking for variances, correct?
Or a waiver.
Or a waiver.
Right, that's what they're asking for.
So the waivers would be listed as to why this road won't meet the subdivision control, correct? For width, sidewalks, lighting, things of that nature. I understand there's already a road in there, but it doesn't meet subdivision specifications. So now we're going to improve it to meet subdivision specifications with some waivers in order to develop Lot 2. And where is Lot 2 going? What's been proposed for Lot 2, or what are we talking about putting on that? What kind of impact is that going to have on Lot 2?
So I think they were saying that they're going to improve it, but it's not going to be up to the formal specifications. And they said that Lot 2 is going to be potentially purchased by another group and made in residential apartments.
Right.
That's the plan. Obviously, in a subdivision plan, that's not part of the actual preliminary subdivision, that's not part of the plan, but that's what we're told is the intention.
Okay. But the roadway itself, as it sits, isn't sufficient to handle whatever they're going to do with Lot 2. And I know they're going to improve it, but shouldn't they have to improve it to subdivision standards?
Well, that's what we're going to
That's what we're going to decide.
Okay.
Right. That's what we have to figure out.
Okay, and then, again, they did say somebody else purchased Lot 2, so that other person will be in here to propose whatever it is that's going to happen with that lot from that
Correct.
point forward.
Correct.
Okay, and at that point, there'll be discussions about the impact of that on the neighborhood, and traffic studies and all that stuff.
I assume so. It depends on what type of permitting they require, but assuming that they need a special permit, then yes.
Yeah,
That's,
I mean,
I can't say what's going to be required because we don't have a project, but assuming it's going to be a residential apartment building, it will be thoroughly vetted.
right, but based on what you guys decide to allow them to do with that roadway is going to determine what ultimately can happen with Lot 2, with this roadway that they're proposing now. I mean, if there's certain restrictions on it, then it's going to be, for width and what have you, it's going to only handle so many vehicles coming and going.
We're not going to do something stupid. That's it. I mean, we're going to look at it with the idea that it's going to have a potential build-out, and that we have to have the flexibility.
I understand that.
Providing adequate access. So, I mean, the fact that we know something's going to go there is going to be a factor in our decision.
Yeah, we don't know yet. That's what we're going to discuss.
And as part of the, if I may? Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
please.
And as part of the definitive process, we're going to have to propose certain specifications and what specific provisions we'd be looking to waive in terms of the extent of the roadway.
As John well knows, that back in the day when preliminaries were used quite extensively, it was like 25, 30 years ago, when it was a lot more open space. And sometimes a reason why preliminary was done was because the zoning may change, and it was like in the zoning. There's a little bit different set of circumstances here, but my point is, there are a lot of times we denied preliminary plans and we approved the definitive, so we may even do that here. I mean, or we may approve it with very strict conditions, so.
Right, we can approve a preliminary plan, but not necessarily approve the same.
Yeah, I mean, we could,
more
the
detail.
issue, I mean, the gentleman raised a legitimate point that, you have to have reasonable access from Lot 2 out to High Street, and therefore that roadway at some point is going to have to meet spec and meet the volumes and so forth. Do we do it now or do it later? I don't know.
That's my point exactly. I think it kind of needs to start now. I mean, I'm all for improvement and development. I mean, I've been doing it for over 20 years myself. I'm also a civil engineer. So I look at things a little bit differently than most people look at them. But I'm just concerned that there have been a lot of things that have been going on with the development of this property since it, changed ownership. That back area is now being used as a snow piling site. I mean, there's trucks in there all the time. My house is vibrating all the time. We've had furniture in our house break and fall apart because of the trucks. There's all kinds of stuff going on there that the land shouldn't be being used for right now, and there's nobody policing it, you know? I mean, I've called the police department. They say, hey, you know, we got snow to pile up. It's never been piled up there before, so I'm just a little concerned as to where this is all going. You know, I can't keep them from developing their property the way they want to. I know if I owned it, I'd want to do what I can as well, but I'd also want to do what's right by everybody around me. And when I developed that piece of land next to it, I kept all of that in mind. You know, we built homes that fit into the neighborhood. We listened to neighborhood concerns. We've always tried to do what was right by people, and I feel that, you know, you've got quite a bit of power right now to look at this roadway, to make sure that this roadway is going to be able to handle what might be proposed on Lot 2. I know you don't know right now, and you're going to handle that at that point, but just approving a road, saying, okay, well, you know, it needs to be 30 feet, we'll let you do it at 24, you know, whatever. I don't know what the exact details are. I haven't looked at it yet, but I just want to state to be extremely cautious about it, because there's a lot of development going on in town. And again, as long as we can support it all with our school systems, and High Street has become a major street now. When I first started developing and I moved in this neighborhood in 2000, I could pass up and down the street without a problem. Now, coming home on High Street, I got to worry half the time if there's going to be an 18-wheeler in my way loading and unloading. I don't understand why this development of this property, somebody hasn't figured out that, okay, trucks need to park off in the parking lot and load and unload. I worry that an ambulance is going to try and come down there and can't get by. I've almost seen kids get hit. You know, they try to do things up the street. I know, I'm going off on a tangent. I understand that, but I just want to let everyone know how we really feel in the neighborhood. And just, you know, I wouldn't say, don't be too lenient, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know, there's a bylaw in place for a reason.
Good enough.
Thank you for your time.
So,
Hi, Robin Morgeson, 147 High Street. I realize I'm a little confused about the process, so bear with me for 1 second. When I got this notice in the mail, I called the town and I printed out the plans, and it's very confusing because I haven't been privy to any initial conversations, so this is the first I'm hearing that there's apartments planned for Lot 2. And of course, my initial concern is how many and how much additional traffic in the neighborhood. You know, it's a close-knit neighborhood, and for the most part, there are elements of the development of the mills that have been very positive down the street from us. But I do worry about, a significant amount of residential development in that area and where all those cars are going to travel to and so forth. So I'm raising it now because I'm not sure of the process, and I just want it noted.
sure, it's for later, so, so, like I said, this is just for whether or not for dividing up the land into different parcels, into different, see, the Lot 1, Lot 2, Lot 3. Within a month or two, we should get a proposal on what is going to be requested at Lot 2, which will have its own whole process. So at that point, we'll know a lot more about potential impacts, and that's when we'll be really asking those questions. I think the gentleman before you raised some really good questions and comments about the roadway, which we have to think about how much to allow or not allow without knowing what's going to be there. Because you are asking us to waive something without knowing what ultimately is going to be there. So I think that's a real fair point for now. The traffic and all of that'll come later.
Right. And the only other question I had was, I was under the impression that there was some conservation land back there, where those houses are on that side of High Street behind them. I don't know if that, because it's really hard to read that, it was even hard to read this, if that's noted on there or how that plays into it. I'm just curious about that.
I think it's the walking path, right, that Gina's developing. I think it's
sorry,
off
what
the
are you talking
property,
Is there
and
conservation land?
I don't think it's conservation.
You're talking about the wetlands area?
Yeah,
Wetlands here?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some wetlands areas, you can see them delineated on the map there.
So
No,
those,
but I
the
think
squiggly lines?
If you remember, there's going to be a walking path.
Through the
It's
middle.
it's not proposed for here, it's
I
proposed for
thought it's at the edge, it's on the other side of the street. Yeah, it's the
It's
other
on the
side of the
east
street.
So at the
So
top,
wetlands are the area in the middle there, it's a soil wetland, and then the lines on the outside are the buffer zones.
right, so there are, what it describes as the buffer zones require, do and do not allow certain types of building and disturbance. But again, that's not, nothing that we're being asked to waive or change with this plan. Okay,
And there has been an ORAD issued confirming the delineation as well.
right, so that's been through conservation. Okay, so where do we go from here, Monica?
Okay, with the preliminary subdivision, you have 45 days after submission of the preliminary plan, in which you notify the applicant, of course by certified mail, whether the plan has been approved or it's been approved with modifications,
Yeah.
or it's been denied. So
So we
you
can
can
come-
determine if you want to add some conditions now prior to the definitive subdivision plan.
Yeah,
And again, the preliminary subdivision plan comes after, and that is the more robust.
right, so we can come back
evaluation.
in a few weeks and discuss this and discuss if we want the waivers and things like that. Or no,
Well,
we just-
no, you have
Yeah, I
with the.
think, well, I mean, we have 45 days,
Right.
but I do think,
No,
I'd
no,
rather
the
have
45 days
When-
come from the date of submission. So
right,
the
which is
45
when?
days, so it was submitted on January 31st.
Okay. So that's what I
So you
think.
have until March 17th, which is technically a Sunday. So you really should think
you
about
gotta
your.
give us some time.
I don't know that it can be.
Or else we're gonna have to vote it now. And if we have to vote it now, I would vote no, just because this is the first we've heard it. Not that it really matters, but, I mean, we haven't had time to really, we like to prepare our decisions before we vote. And if we can't, if you don't want to give us an extension, then I don't see how
Is
you
this
can
something
do
that
other
can
than
be
vote no.
extended? That's, I don't, can we get an extent, I'm not sure,
Yeah,
on
we
subdivision?
should do it all the time.
On subdivisions or on special permits?
Yeah, you can do it in a subdivision.
On the
Well, this is a-
preliminary, I'm not so sure.
This is a preliminary.
Well, if I may just add, I mean, this is simply the preliminary, and we're going to have to come back with a more detailed definitive, whether the board approves or denies it. We'd be happy with an approval, but
Okay, so, I mean, really the road is the only thing that
it's over
really.
discussing.
Well, I mean, what we should do is, we would deny it and say it didn't meet all of our rules and regulations, which this doesn't, and it would be a perfectly legitimate reason for denying it.
You could-
Right, because it's requesting waivers.
Yeah.
Right, but couldn't we also approve it with waivers?
You're allowed to add modifications to this. Under, again,
Well, I mean-
255 4.1, it does say, I just want to add, the approval of a preliminary plan does not constitute an approval of a subdivision and does not facilitate the procedure in securing or approval of a definitive plan. So this is something to
No, yeah, I
to
mean, you're
consider.
right, and, I mean, I think you could do two things. You could approve it without the waivers, or you could deny it for the same reason. I mean, those are the two options that you have. But the problem is, I think it would be a mistake to grant some waivers if we haven't done the due diligence to decide whether they're the right thing to do or not. That's the problem.
I don't think you really have to grant the waivers tonight. It's just,
Okay.
we were just telegraphing those waivers
So those are the waivers you'll be requesting on the.
for the definitive,
Okay,
correct?
so does it matter what we do tonight?
No, not really.
Right, so as of, okay, fine, which is fair, thank you. So as of now, the plan does not meet our
Yeah,
specifications, right?
so I mean,
Okay,
if that were the
so-
case, and, I know you don't take offense at it.
Right. So I
but
think-
that
right,
we
so
would,
that we should deny-
deny the preliminary plan because it doesn't comply with planning
Right.
rules and regulations.
And I think the key for really the roadway, I mean, everything else seems pretty benign. Obviously, we need to look at it, but everything else seems pretty benign. The gentleman who spoke really made some good points about the roadway, so any more information about why you are requesting the numbers you're requesting, what kind of use we should expect it to facilitate, and why you need it. and what the impacts would be helpful. So, okay, so can we get a motion to deny the
The preliminary subdivision.
preliminary subdivision?
And just make sure
plan?
you add your reason for denial, because as it
Right,
does
as
state.
it, that it
Doesn't
does not,
comply with planning board rules and regulations.
yes.
So-
Second.
So moved, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you for
Thanks.
coming and giving us all the information.
Thank you. I don't remember John ever approving a preliminary.
Okay. Someone should have told me that in the beginning.
No, I think that's true. I think we did approve one.
Yes.
We did. Motion.
Okay, hold on. So we have a motion, yeah.
Yeah.
Motion to approve minutes of February 27th. We have two sets.
From your site visit.
And 27th and 28th?
Well, I was going to do one at a time.
Oh, okay.
But 27th and 28th site visit. We'll do
Okay.
them all at once.
Can we get a second on the motion to approve the minutes from the site visits? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Can I ask